Hi viewers, you are listening the Alpha King's Untold Stories, romantic audiobooks that will make your heart race and you will enjoy it a lot. Don't forget to subscribe for more enchanting love tales. The cold in the Shadowfang territory didn't just bite, it chewed. It gnawed at the bones and turned the blood to slush, a punishment that never relented. For Elara Vance, the cold was the only constant she had known since her parents vanished a decade ago. It lived in the drafty corners of the pack house, in the icy water of her scrub bucket, and in the hollow place inside her chest where a wolf should have been. Elara, if those floors aren't shining by the time Alpha Kale returns, you'll be sleeping in the kennels with the actual dogs. The shrill voice of Margot, the head housekeeper, cut through the cavernous hall. Elara didn't look up. She kept her head bowed, her red and chapped hands scrubbing the rough stone with a brush that had lost its bristles long ago. "Yes, Margot," she whispered, the sound barely a breath. "Speak up, you worthless runt!" Margot's boot connected with the bucket of filthy, freezing water beside Elara, sending a wave of icy grime over her thin, threadbare dress. Elara gasped as the cold shock seared through to her skin, but she bit down on her lip until she tasted copper. Crying was a luxury. Tears were weakness, and weakness in the Shadowfang pack was an invitation for pain. At 20 years old, Elara was an anomaly. A ghost. She hadn't shifted. She had no wolf, not even a whisper of one. In a world ruled by fang and claw, by hierarchy and primal power, she was less than the dirt she scrubbed. She was wolfless, a drain on resources, a living stain on the pack's pride. "I heard you," Elara forced out, her jaw clenched tight. "I will finish." Margot sneered, looming over the crouched girl. "You'd better, and when you're done, Beta Marcus demands you go to the Northern Ridge. We're out of firewood for Alpha's hearth." Alara's head snapped up, her gray eyes wide with genuine fear. "The Northern Ridge? Margot, the storm warnings. The radio said a whiteout is coming. It's a death sentence to go out there now." "Then perhaps the pack will finally be rid of its burden," Margot spat, already turning away. "Go, or shall I tell Alpha Kale you were caught stealing silver again?" It was a lie, a vicious, casual lie, but it didn't matter. Alpha Kale would believe whatever justified his contempt. An hour later, swaddled in a coat 3 sizes too big and riddled with holes, Elara was trudging through knee-deep snow. The wind screamed like a banshee, tearing at her scarf and whipping her dark hair across a face already going numb. The pack house was miles behind her, and ahead lay the forbidden boundary, the silent, watchful line of marker stones that separated Shadowfang land from the Dominion. The Dominion, land ruled directly by the Alpha King, Lysander Thorn. King Lysander, the name alone was a whisper of terror, a story told to make unruly pups behave. They said he was a giant of a man, his heart forged from glacier ice, his eyes like chips of frozen gold. They said a curse clung to him, that any who drew too close met a grim and sudden end. Elara shivered, dragging a pathetic sled behind her. Her fingers were blocks of ice, her toes screaming with the burn of frostbite. Just gather the wood, don't think, just move. Then she heard it, a sound that was not the wind, nor the distant howl of a kimberwolf. It was a cry, thin, greedy, desperate, a human sound being swallowed by the storm. She froze, her breath pluming in the air. "Hello?" she called out, her voice instantly stolen by the gale. The cry came again, louder, more frantic. It was coming beyond the marker stones, inside the king's territory. The law was absolute. Trespass in the Dominion meant death. The king's sentinels, his elite guard, were said to patrol with silent, deadly efficiency. But that cry, it was a child. It was a baby. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She could turn back. She should turn back. To save a stranger was to sign her own death warrant. To leave them was to let the cold claim an innocent life, a life that had just begun. Damn it, she hissed into the wind. She dropped the sled's rope and scrambled over the icy boundary stones. The snow was deeper here, pristine and untouched. She fought through a thicket of frozen brambles that clawed at her coat and skin, following that weakening wail. She stumbled into a small clearing beneath the skeletal branches of an ancient giant pine. There, half buried in a drift of deep royal blue silk, was a basket of deep royal blue silk. Elara fell to her knees, her breath catching. She brushed the snow away with frantic, numb hands. "Oh, please, please be Elias." She pulled back the silk blanket. A baby no more than a few months stared up at her. His skin was pale, tinged with blue at his lips, but his eyes, they were a startling, vivid violet, wide with an intelligence that felt far beyond his months. "You poor little soul," Elara whispered, tears instantly freezing on her lashes. "Who could leave you here?" She didn't hesitate. Unbuttoning her ragged coat, she pulled the freezing infant against her own body heat, trying to shield him with her meager body heat. The baby stopped crying instantly. Those extraordinary violet eyes locked onto hers, and a tiny, chubby hand emerged from the blanket. Elara thought he would clutch her shirt. Instead, his icy fingers closed around the bare skin of her left wrist, exposed between her torn glove and sleeve. Pain. It wasn't the cold. It was a searing, branding agony, as if a white-hot iron had been pressed into her flesh. "Ah, sweetheart, let go, it hurts," Elara cried out, but he held on. A pulse of pure, golden light erupted from his tiny grip, blinding in the gloom of the storm. It swirled around her arm, a living, searing coil of energy that sank into her skin with a sizzling hiss. Elara screamed, falling backward into the snow, her only thought to cradle the baby safe against her. The light faded as suddenly as it had come, leaving behind an afterimage burned into her vision. Gasping, trembling, Elara looked at her wrist. Etched into her skin, in vivid, shimmering gold that seemed to move and breathe just beneath the surface, was a symbol, a wolf's head, crowned with intertwined antlers and a single, fierce rose. She knew that symbol. Every wolf in the world knew it. It was the royal crest of House Thorn, the personal mark of the Alpha King. "What have you done?" she thought, staring at the infant, who now gurgled softly, his violet eyes serene. Crack! The sound of a heavy boot snapping a branch echoed like a gunshot. Elara looked up, terror turning her blood to ice. 5 figures emerged from the swirling white. They were massive, clad in black tactical gear and fur-lined cloaks that billowed around them. Their eyes glowed in the dim light, amber, red, fiery orange. Sentinels. The leader, a mountain of a man with a scar carving through his eyebrow, stepped forward, a sleek rifle in his hands. He lowered the weapon slightly, his predatory gaze fixed not on her face, but on the fatal golden glow on her arm. He inhaled deeply, his expression shifting from lethal intent to stunned confusion. "That scent," he growled, his voice like grinding stones. "It is the king's own aura, but you reek of rogue and weakness." Elara scrambled back, clutching the baby to her. "I didn't steal him. I found him. He was freezing." The sentinel ignored her. His eyes dropped to her wrist. He went completely still. "Commander," one of the other soldiers whispered, a note of awe and fear in his tone. "Look at her arm." The commander took another step, his glowing eyes widening to an impossible degree. "The consort's mark," he breathed. "It cannot be." He tapped a device at his ear. "Central, this is Commander Rylan. Situation at Sector 7. The asset has been found, and a carrier has been marked. Notify His Majesty. Immediate extraction." "Please," Elara whimpered, curling around the baby. "I only wanted to help him." Commander Rylan looked down at her, his face an unreadable mask of duty and disbelief. "Pray, girl," he said, his voice low and grave. Pray this child is who we believe him to be, for you have just branded yourself as the chosen of Lysander Thorn, and the king does not tolerate what is his being touched by strangers." The journey to the Onyx Citadel was a nightmare of silent speed and paralyzing fear. Elara was not restrained, which somehow felt more threatening than chains. She sat in the back of an armored vehicle, the heat blasting, the baby, who the soldiers called only the asset, sleeping peacefully in her arms. He had refused to be separated from her. When Rylan had tried to take him, the infant had let out a cry so piercing, so raw with power, that the hardened warriors had flinched, their wolves whining in submission. Now, as the imposing black spires of the citadel pierced the stormy sky, Elara could only stare. It wasn't a palace, it was a fortress hewn from the mountain itself, a monument of grim power. The massive gates opened silently, and they passed into a courtyard where even the falling snow seemed orderly. "Out," Commander Rylan, opening her door. "The king awaits in the throne room. Do not speak, do not meet his gaze. Your life depends on it." Elara stumbled on legs of jelly, holding the baby like a shield. She was marched through halls of gleaming black marble and obsidian, her dirty rags and worn boots a shocking stain against the oppressive grandeur. Servants and guards alike stopped to stare, their whispers a hissing chorus around her. "A beggar? Is that the child? Look at her wrist. Impossible." The great doors to the throne room were black iron, etched with scenes of ancient wars. They swung open without a sound. The room was vast, a cavern of shadow and cold flame. A long path of crimson led to a dais where a throne of twisted, dark metal sat, and on it, lounging with an air of lethal boredom, was Alpha King Lysander Thorn. He was every bit the terrifying legend. He was tall, his frame powerful even at rest, clad in simple black that emphasized broad shoulders and a lean strength. His hair was the color of raven wings, his features sharp and unforgiving. But it was his eyes that trapped her, a pale, piercing gold, like sunlight through ice. The air around him vibrated with a palpable heavy power, smelling of ozone, cold stone, and something old and wild. Standing beside the throne was a woman of breathtaking, cold beauty, tall, with honey-blonde hair coiled intricately, dressed in silver silks that shimmered like a frozen lake. Lady Seraphina, daughter of a powerful southern alpha, the female everyone assumed would be queen. "Rylan," the king's voice rolled through the hall. It was quiet, yet it resonated in Elara's very bones. "You drag me from council for this, a stray and a pup?" Rylan bowed deeply, forcing Elara to her knees with a firm hand. "Your Majesty," he said, voice steady, "the trespasser was found on the northern border with the child." Lysander sat up slowly, the boredom evaporating into razor-sharp focus. "The child," he said. "My nephew sleeps safely upstairs. What game is this?" "Not your nephew, sire," Rylan said carefully. "The other one, the one from the prophecy." A deafening silence crashed down. Lady Seraphina stepped forward, her beautiful face twisting with contempt. "A filthy rogue found the seer's child? Give him here." She moved to snatch the baby from Elara's arms. "No!" Elara reacted instinctively, twisting her body to shield him. "How dare you!" Seraphina's hand flew up, ready to strike. "Enough." Lysander didn't raise his voice, but Seraphina froze as if turned to stone. The king rose from his throne. He descended the steps, each footfall echoing in the silent room. He stopped before Elara, his polished boots in her line of sight. "Look at me." The command was undeniable. Slowly, Elara lifted her head. When her storm-gray eyes met his burning gold, the world tilted. For Lysander, it was an earthquake in his soul. A scent hit him, cutting through the room's sterile cold. Vanilla and wild rain, hidden under soap and fear. Mate, the word was a thunderclap in his mind. His inner wolf, a beast long dormant in a self-imposed cage of isolation, roared to life, slamming against his ribs with desperate, forgotten force. Mine.
He locked the feeling down behind centuries of discipline, his face a mask of granite. It was impossible. A trick, a weakness he could not afford. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice colder than the storm outside. "Elara," she whispered, throat tight, "of the Shadowfang pack." "You possess something of mine," Lysander stated, his gaze falling to the sleeping infant. "Where did you find him?" "In the snow, Your Majesty, under the great pine. He was alone." Lysander's eyes narrowed. "And Rylan speaks of a mark?" Trembling, Elara pulled back her sleeve. The golden crest on her wrist pulsed softly, casting a gentle light on the dark floor. A collective gasp rippled through the court. Seraphina paled. A glamour, a witch's trick. Lysander moved. He grabbed Elara's hand, his skin searing hot against her cold flesh. He rubbed his thumb over the mark. It didn't smudge. Instead, it flared brighter at his touch, and a wave of shocking warmth, of rightness, traveled up his arm and settled deep in his chest. He dropped her hand as if scorched. "Unbelievable," he muttered, taking a step back. "The consort's mark only appears when the true queen is recognized by the kingdom's heart." An elderly voice rasped from the shadows.
An old man in gray robes shuffled forward. Elder Theo, the royal historian. He peered at the baby, then at Elara's wrist, his ancient eyes widening. "The prophecy said the child of winter would unveil the mother of the realm," he murmured, wonder in his tone. "It seems, Your Majesty, that fate has chosen. And fate has chosen her." "Fate is a fool," Seraphina screeched, finding her voice. "Look at her! She is a wolfless cleaner, scum. She cannot stand where a queen should stand." Lysander's gaze swept over Elara. He saw the poverty, the fear, the scars of a hard life on her arms, but he also saw the fierce, protective way she cradled the child, the defiance in her gray eyes, even as she knelt, and he felt the undeniable, terrifying pull in his blood. "Rylan," Lysander said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Take her to the East Tower. Guard the door. No one in, no one out." "Lysander," Seraphina protested, grabbing his arm. "You cannot house this creature in the royal wing." He turned his head slowly, and the look in his gold eyes made her release him and step back, a shudder running through her. "She bears my house, Seraphina. Until I discern its meaning, she is under my protection. Harm her, and you answer to me." He looked back at Elara, who was shaking uncontrollably. "Do not mistake this for mercy," he said, his voice a low whisper meant only for her. "You are a mystery, Elara Vance, and I dismantle mysteries. If you are a threat to this child or to my kingdom, I will end you myself." As the guards led her away, Elara caught Seraphina's eyes over the king's shoulder. They held no cold beauty now, only a promise of pure, undiluted hatred. "Enjoy your borrowed time, little rat," Seraphina mouthed silently. "It will be your last." The East Tower was not a cell, it was a gilded cage of terrifying luxury. The room was larger than the entire Shadowfang packhouse, filled with rich tapestries, a fireplace big enough to stand in, and a bed piled with furs. But the heavy iron bolt on the outside of the ornate door told the true story. Elara sat on the edge of the bed, the baby, she'd decided to call him Leo for now, sleeping in a nest of pillows. She walked to the bathroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. A stranger in a simple, clean gown of cream wool stared back. The dress couldn't hide the silver lines on her arms, the legacy of Margot's cruelty, or the hollows under her eyes. And on her wrist, the mark hummed with a low, steady warmth, a permanent, pulsating reminder of her impossible situation. Click. The lock turned. Elara spun, placing herself between the door and the sleeping Leo. King Lysander entered. He had shed his formal outerwear, wearing only a black tunic and trousers.
He carried a tray of food. He paused, his golden eyes assessing her. For a fleeting second, his gaze seemed to soften, to linger on the way the firelight caught in her dark, damp hair. Then it was gone, replaced by that impenetrable ice. "You need to eat," he stated, setting the tray on a table. "The healers say you are starved. You are no use to the child if you are weak." Elara eyed the food, roasted meat, steaming vegetables, bread that smelled like heaven. Her stomach clenched with painful hunger. "Is it poisoned?" The question left her lips before she could stop it. Lysander looked almost offended. "I do not deal in poisons, Elara. If I wished you dead, your body would already be feeding the crows." "Lady Seraphina might not share your honor." Elara surprised herself with her own boldness. Was it the mark? The baby? A newfound spark she didn't recognize? A faint, humorless smirk touched his lips. "Seraphina is ambitious, not suicidal." He took a piece of bread, ate it, and swallowed. "See? Now eat." Cautiously, Elara approached. She sat and took a small bite. The flavors exploded on her tongue, so rich and good it brought a fresh prick of tears to her eyes. She ate slowly under his unnerving, watchful gaze. He pulled a chair close, too close. His scent of ozone and cedar enveloped her. "You smell different," he murmured, his voice dropping, like a storm on the horizon, like something waiting. Suddenly, Leo screamed. It was not a cry of hunger or discomfort. It was a shriek of primal, soul-deep terror. Lysander was on his feet in an instant, a feral growl ripping from his chest, his eyes shifting to fully lupine amber slits. "Get behind me," he roared. The shadows in the corner of the room, deep and thick from the firelight, began to move. They twisted, coalescing not into the shape of a man or beast, but into a formless, oily black mass with two pinpricks of sickly green light for eyes. A shadow wraith, a creature of pure dark magic. It lunged, not for Lysander, but for the bed, for the child. "No!" Elara didn't think, she didn't hide. She threw herself across the bed, covering Leo's small body with her own, just as the creature's whip-like tendril of darkness lashed out. Searing, blinding pain exploded across her back as the shadow claws tore through wool and skin. An old man in gray robes shuffled forward. Elder Theo, the royal historian. He peered at the baby, then at Elara's wrist, his ancient eyes widening. "The prophecy said the child of winter would unveil the mother of the realm," he murmured, wonder in his tone. "It seems, Your Majesty, that fate has chosen. And fate has chosen her." "Fate is a fool," Seraphina screeched, finding her voice. "Look at her! She is a wolfless cleaner, scum! She cannot stand where a queen should stand." Lysander's gaze swept over Elara. He saw the poverty, the fear, the scars of a hard life on her arms, but he also saw the fierce, protective way she cradled the child, the defiance in her gray eyes, even as she knelt, and he felt the undeniable, terrifying pull in his blood. "Rylan," Lysander said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Take her to the east tower. Guard the door. No one in, no one out." "Lysander," Seraphina protested, grabbing his arm. "You cannot house this creature in the royal wing." He turned his head slowly, and the look in his gold eyes made her release him and step back, a shudder running through her. "She bears my house, Seraphina. Until I discern its meaning, she is under my protection. Harm her, and you answer to me." He looked back at Elara, who was shaking uncontrollably. "Do not mistake this for mercy," he said, his voice a low whisper meant only for her. "You are a mystery, Elara Vance, and I dismantle mysteries. If you are a threat to this child or to my kingdom, I will end you myself."
As the guards led her away, Elara caught Seraphina's eyes over the king's shoulder. They held no cold beauty now, only a promise of pure, undiluted hatred. "Enjoy your borrowed time, little rat," Seraphina mouthed silently. "It will be your last." The East Tower was not a cell, it was a gilded cage of terrifying luxury. The room was larger than the entire Shadowfang packhouse, filled with rich tapestries, a fireplace big enough to stand in, and a bed piled with furs. But the heavy iron bolt on the outside of the ornate door told the true story. Elara sat on the edge of the bed, the baby, she'd decided to call him Leo for now, sleeping in a nest of pillows. She walked to the bathroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. A stranger in a simple, clean gown of cream wool stared back. The dress couldn't hide the silver lines on her arms, the legacy of Margot's cruelty, or the hollows under her eyes. And on her wrist, the mark hummed with a low, steady warmth, a permanent, pulsating reminder of her impossible situation. Click. The lock turned. Elara spun, placing herself between the door and the sleeping Leo. King Lysander entered. He had shed his formal outerwear, wearing only a black tunic and trousers. He carried a tray of food. He paused, his golden eyes assessing her. For a fleeting second, his gaze seemed to soften, to linger on the way the firelight caught in her dark, damp hair. Then it was gone, replaced by that impenetrable ice. "You need to eat," he stated, setting the tray on a table. "The healers say you are starved. You are no use to the child if you are weak." Elara eyed the food, roasted meat, steaming vegetables, bread that smelled like heaven. Her stomach clenched with painful hunger. "Is it poisoned?" The question left her lips before she could stop it. Lysander looked almost offended. "I do not deal in poisons, Elara. If I wished you dead, your body would already be feeding the crows." "Lady Seraphina might not share your honor." Elara surprised herself with her own boldness. Was it the mark? The baby? A newfound spark she didn't recognize? A faint, humorless smirk touched his lip. Her back was a mess of blood, the cuts deep and angry. I'm all right," she gasped, her face ghostly white. She looked down. "Leo, is he hurt?" The baby was crying, but unharmed. As Elara lay bleeding, Leo reached out a tiny hand and placed it directly over her frantically beating heart. He looked into her eyes, his violet gaze solemn. "Don't move," Lysander ordered, panic sharpening his regal tone. "Guards! Healer!" But before the door could burst open, the baby's eyes began to glow with that same intense violet light. A soft, warm pulse of energy radiated from his small palm, flowing directly into Elara's chest. The agony in her back vanished, replaced by a sensation of cool, rushing water. The flesh knitted together, the bleeding ceased, and in mere seconds, only smooth, unmarred skin remained under the torn fabric of her dress. Elara sat up, gasping, clutching the front of her gown. She looked at Leo, who gave a tired coo and closed his eyes, falling into an exhausted sleep. The door crashed open. Commander Rylan and a squad of sentinels charged in, weapons ready. They took in the scene, the blood, the naked king, the terrified girl, the sleeping child. "Sire, are you injured?" Lysander stood, his body a testament to coiled fury. He pointed a finger at Rylan. A shadow wraith was summoned inside my citadel's wards. It bypassed ancient magic meant to keep such filth out. His voice was terrifyingly calm, which made it all the more deadly. "There is a traitor under this roof, Rylan, someone with access to dark magic and royal chambers." He turned, wrapping a thick fur throw around Elara's shoulders, pulling her and the baby protectively close. His scent surrounded her, not just cedar and ozone now, but concern and a raging, protective fury. "Find who did this," Lysander commanded, his golden eyes locking with Ryland's, "and bring me their head." Chapter 2. The Unraveling Truth. Dawn did not bring peace to the Onyx Citadel. It brought a silent, seething tension thicker than the fortress walls. Elara was moved from the East Tower to the king's own personal chambers, a suite even more secure, guarded by sentinels whose loyalty was to Lysander alone. The luxury was lost on her. Every shadow seemed to be a threat, every whisper in the hall a potential conspiracy. Leo slept fitfully, his small face often creasing with dreams Elara could not comprehend. The mark on her wrist pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm, a constant, warm reminder of the bond she still did not understand. It was a brand, a claim, a mystery. A formal summons arrived at noon, delivered by a stone-faced guard. The High Council of Elders had convened. They demanded Elara's presence for questioning. "You do not have to go," Lysander said, pacing the length of the opulent sitting room. He was dressed in his formal military regalia, black and severe, a cape of black wolf fur draped over his shoulders. He looked like a storm given human form, beautiful and terrifying. "If they try to harm you, Elara," he vowed, his voice a dark promise, "I will reduce the council hall to rubble. That is not a threat, it is a certainty." The council hall was a vast circular amphitheater of gray stone, cold and imposing. 12 elders sat on raised stone podiums, their faces etched with age and severity. In the center of the floor stood a single pedestal holding a large bowl filled with a liquid that shimmered like molten mercury. The galleries were packed with nobles, visiting alphas, and pack dignitaries, and at the very front, standing with an air of vindictive triumph, was Lady Seraphina. Elara walked in, holding Leo close. Lysander strode beside her, his hand a firm, possessive weight at the small of her back. He guided her to the center of the floor, but refused to step away, his presence a palpable shield. "Your Majesty," Elder Theo said gently from his podium, "this is a questioning for the girl. You must take your seat of observance." Lysander's jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod to Elara. "I'm right here," he murmured, before moving to a throne-like chair set apart for him, his gaze never leaving her. Seraphina stepped forward as the accuser, her silver gown catching the light. "Honored elders," began her voice, sweet and clear, carrying to every corner, "we have all witnessed the strange events. A strange, wolfless rogue appears from a blizzard, bearing a child of prophecy. Instantly she is marked with a royal seal no one has seen in 2 centuries. Then a creature of pure darkness attacks the royal wing, and she is mysteriously healed. This is not the work of fate. This is dark craft. She is a spy, a sorceress sent from our enemies to corrupt the royal line and steal the kingdom's heart." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Seraphina smiled. "I call a witness, Margot, head housekeeper of the Shadow Fang." Elara's blood ran cold. Margot? Here? The familiar pinched face of her tormentor appeared, waddling into the hall in a new, ill-fitting dress. She refused to look at Elara. "Margot," Seraphina purred, "tell the council, did Elara ever exhibit unnatural traits?" Margot wrung her hands, playing the part of the reluctant informant perfectly. "Well, yes, my lady, strange things. She never fell ill, not even when we had to confine her to the cold storage for discipline. She'd come out freezing, but without a sniffle. And the animals, the pack's war dogs, fierce beasts, they would whimper and cower when she walked by. They feared her." "Liar!" The word burst from Elara, fueled by years of pent-up anger. "I fed those dogs scraps when no one else did. They didn't fear me. They knew me." "Silence!" The head elder boomed. "The accused will speak only when addressed." Seraphina's smirk was triumphant. "You see, a natural influence. She is a danger to the king and the realm. I invoke the trial of silver. Let the truth be burned into her flesh." A collective gasp filled the hall. The trial of silver. The accused would submerge their hand in the liquid silver. For a human or a wolf with a pure soul, it would feel cool, inert. For a witch, or one tainted by dark magic, it would boil and burn, searing the flesh from the bone in agonizing seconds. "I accept." Elara's voice, clear and steady, cut through the noise. Lysander gripped the arms of his chair, the stone cracking under his fingers. She handed Leo to a stern-looking elder Theo, who took the baby with surprising gentleness. The infant whimpered, reaching for her, but she turned to the pedestal. "Do it, witch," Seraphina hissed, leaning close as Elara passed. "Let us hear you scream." Elara stood before the bowl. The liquid silver swirled, hypnotic and deadly. She thought of her parents' faces, fading memories. She thought of the endless cold of her old life. She thought of Leo's trusting violet eyes. Taking a deep breath, she plunged her hand into the bowl. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for unimaginable agony. But there was no pain. Instead, a surge of immense, cool power rushed up her arm, a feeling of awakening. The liquid silver in the bowl began to bubble, not with heat, but with released energy. "She burns!" Seraphina shrieked in triumph. "See, she—" She cut off her own cry. The silver wasn't burning Elara, it was climbing. Defying gravity, it flowed up her arm like a living liquid glove, coating her skin in a shimmering metallic sheen. It swirled around her shoulders, glowing with an intense, blinding white light. The hall began to tremble, the stained glass windows rattled in their frames. Above Elara, a spectral image began to form. Not a wolf, but a massive, ethereal creature, a white wolf of pure light with 3 majestic flowing tails, a symbol of ancient divine power. Elder Theo rose slowly to his feet, his cane clattering to the floor, unnoticed. His face was a mask of awe and dawning understanding. "By the breath of the first moon," he whispered, his voice trembling. "That is not dark magic." The silver liquid fell away from Elara's hand, returning to the bowl, leaving her skin flawless and glowing with a soft inner luminescence. The mark on her wrist had transformed. It was no longer just the black thorned wolf. Intertwined with it now was a radiant crescent moon, crafted from what looked like solidified moonlight. "What is the meaning of this?" Lysander demanded, rising from his seat, his golden eyes wide as he stared at Elara as if seeing her for the first time. Elder Theo pointed a shaking finger. "For 20 years we believed the line was extinct, lost to the Great War." He turned to the stunned council, his voice gaining strength with revelation. "The White Wolf of the North, the direct bloodline of the moon goddess's chosen guardians, the only lineage capable of producing a true, born Luna, a queen who does not simply rule by strength, but heals by presence." He looked at Seraphina, whose face was now chalk white. "She is not a rogue. She is the lost daughter of Alpha Supreme Orion Vance. She is royalty." "Impossible!" Seraphina staggered back. "The Vances were massacred. She's a servant." "She was hidden," Lysander realized aloud, his mind racing. Her wolf bound by powerful magic to mask her scent, to protect her until she was safe, until she was found. Elara looked at her hands. The glow was fading, but the power thrummed within her. A sleeping giant now stirred. The hollow emptiness inside her was gone. In its place was a presence, vast, ancient, patient, and waiting. Her wolf. Lysander walked to Elara, his steps measured.
He didn't kneel this time. He stood before her, looking down into her silver-touched eyes. Elara Vance of the White Wolf line, the true heir. But the moment of staggering revelation was shattered by a slow, sarcastic clapping. The crowd parted, confused. A man in a dark hooded cloak who had been sitting unnoticed in the back of the room strolled into the center of the chamber. He lowered his hood, revealing a face that shared Lysander's stark handsomeness, but was twisted by a cruel smile and eyes burning with chaotic energy. Caspian, the king's exiled brother. "Bravo," Caspian drawled, his gaze fixed hungrily on Leo, still in Elder Theo's arms. "What a touching family reunion. The lost queen found, the prophet child secured, the stuff of legends." He raised a hand, and the very shadows in the room elongated, stretching and sharpening into hundreds of jagged, black ice-like spikes aimed at the gathered crowd. Chaos erupted. Caspian's laughter, sharp and unhinged, echoed off the stone as his shadow spikes shot forth. Lysander moved in a blur of black, shoving Elara behind him toward the relative safety of the Elder's platform. Thud, thud, thud. The spikes slammed into Lysander's back, tearing through his formal uniform. He roared, a sound of pure fury that shook dust from the rafters, but he didn't falter. He was a shield, absorbing the assault meant for Elara and the child. "Lysander!" Elara screamed, watching dark blood bloom on the black fabric. The council hall descended into pandemonium. Nobles scrambled for exits that were suddenly blocked by rippling walls of darkness. Guards fired weapons that passed harmlessly through the shadowy constructs. Lady Seraphina, her earlier bravado gone, cowered behind an overturned bench. "You will not touch him, Lysander," Lysander snarled, turning to face his brother, his body already rippling with the promise of a shift. "Oh, but I already have, little brother," Caspian mocked, twirling his fingers. Another volley of spikes formed. "The child is the key, the convergence point of ancient magic, and he chose such a fragile guardian." His eyes slid at Elara, dripping with contempt. "Elara, get the child and run!" Lysander's command slammed into her mind through a link she didn't know existed, raw and desperate. But she couldn't. She stood frozen, not with fear now, but with a rising tide of fury. She watched the king, her mate, though the words still felt foreign, bleed to protect them. The mate bond, fully unlocked and recognized by the silver trial, flared to life within her. It wasn't a gentle feeling, it was a wildfire of protective instinct. Her wolf, the magnificent white beast she now felt pacing beneath her skin, slammed against her consciousness. He is ours. The child is ours. Fight. Caspian saw her hesitation and seized his chance. A thick, rope-like tendril of living shadow shot across the room, bypassing the embattled king. It wrapped around Leo, yanking him from Elder Theo's startled grasp. "No!" The agony that tore from Elara's throat was primal, the sound of a bond breaking before it could fully form. That pain was the final catalyst. It felt as if every cell in her body was breaking apart and reassembling at once. The sensation was beyond agony. It was annihilation and rebirth, compressed into a single blinding moment. She fell to her knees, a scream ripped from her soul, as pure, searing white light erupted from her skin. The light was so intense it bleached the color from the room, shattering the remaining windows outward. When it faded, Elara Vance was gone. In her place stood a wolf. But not just any wolf. She was ethereal, majestic. Her fur was the pure, flawless white of the first winter snow under a full moon, seeming to glow with its own soft light. She was larger than Lysander's formidable midnight form, her eyes a piercing silver blue that held the wisdom of ages. The white wolf, the living legend.
Caspian stumbled back, the shadow tendril holding Leo flickering as his concentration broke. Impossible! The Vances are dust! The white wolf, Elara, did not snarl. She simply looked at him, and in that gaze was a judgment, a purifying force. Give him back. She launched herself forward, not with a predator's pounce, but with the inevitable force of a tidal wave. She slammed into Caspian, the impact driving the air from his lungs and hurling him back into the stone wall. The shadow around Leo dissipated, and the baby tumbled toward the floor, only to be caught gently in the massive, careful jaws of the midnight wolf, Lysander, who had shifted in the blink of an eye. The two brothers, one light, one dark, faced each other, the infant now safe between them. Caspian scrambled to his feet, his eyes burning with furious red energy. A temporary setback. He threw a concentrated orb of crackling black energy directly at Elara's chest. Elara didn't dodge. She opened her jaws and released a silent, focused wave of white energy. It wasn't fire or sound. It was pure anti-magic. The dark orb hit the wave and simply unraveled, dissolving into harmless motes of light. True fear flashed in Caspian's eyes for the first time. The white wolf was anathema to his stolen power. He looked from her to Lysander, who was growling, low and deadly, guarding the child. Caspian's face twisted in rage. Fine, you want to play, sister dear? We'll play on my field. He slammed his palms onto the stone floor. A jagged crack splintered outward, and from it erupted a portal of swirling black smoke and jagged ice. He lunged for it. He's escaping! Lysander's thought was a shout in her mind. But Caspian wasn't fleeing alone. As he jumped into the rift, a final, desperate lash of shadow shot out, not at them, but at a forgotten figure cowering nearby, Lady Seraphina. It wrapped around her ankle and yanked her, screaming, into the portal after him. The rift snapped shut, with a sound like a thunderclap, leaving the council hall in sudden, deafening silence, smelling of ozone and despair. Lysander shifted back to human form, cradling Leo, who was crying softly. He was at Elara's side in an instant as she too shifted back, the transformation leaving her naked, exhausted, and shaking on the cold stone. He wrapped his fur cape around her, pulling her and the baby into the shelter of his arms. The bond between them was a live wire, humming with shared fear, relief, and a terrifying new responsibility. He took Seraphina, Elara whispered, her voice hoarse. He has a hostage, or a tool, Lysander muttered, his eyes hard, but he failed to get what he truly wanted. He looked down at Leo, then at Elara, his gaze softening infinitesimally. You saved him. You saved us all. Commander Rylan approached, his face grim. Sire, the traitor, the wraith. It was Caspian. He must have had help inside to bypass the wards, but the magic was his. He has been planning this for a long time. He wants the child's power. Elara looked at the mark on her wrist, now permanently altered with the crescent moon. Why? What is Leo? Lysander took a deep breath. He is a prophet child, born under a rare celestial alignment. His blood, his very life force, is said to be a key that can unlock or seal ancient magical seals, seals that keep terrible, primordial things dormant. Caspian doesn't want to rule a kingdom. He wants to unravel the world. We have to go after him, Elara said, the words leaving her lips with a certainty that surprised her. She was no longer the Omega who scrubbed floors. She was the White Wolf, the Queen. Lysander nodded, a fierce pride flashing in his golden eyes.
We will, but not recklessly. Caspian has fled to his stronghold, the glacier's heart, deep in the forbidden peaks. It is a fortress of dark magic and ice. We need an army, and you, he said, his finger gently tilting her chin up, need to learn to be who you truly are. Chapter 4: The Queen's Awakening. The days that followed were a whirlwind of grim preparation and quiet revelation. The Onyx Citadel, once a place of cold intimidation to Elara, became a hive of strategic activity. Lysander spent hours in the war room with his commanders, his face a mask of focused intensity. Elara, meanwhile, was entrusted to Elder Theo and a few fiercely loyal older warriors who remembered the legends of the White Wolves. Her training was not in combat, not yet. It was in communion, in a secluded, sun-drenched courtyard within the citadel, surrounded by ancient, dormant rose bushes. Elara learned to listen. The White Wolf is not merely a shifter form, child. It is a conduit, a vessel of the moon's own purifying energy. Your ancestors were healers of the land, menders of broken magic, peace weavers between warring packs. Your strength does not lie in the domination of force, but in the resilience of spirit. He taught her meditation, to feel the pulse of the earth beneath the citadel's stones, to draw on the cool, constant energy of the moon, even when it was hidden behind clouds. At first, it was frustrating. She was used to doing, to scrubbing, hauling, surviving. This stillness felt like idleness. But slowly she began to feel it, a warmth in her core that had nothing to do with fire, a clarity in her mind that quieted the constant buzz of fear. Her wolf, the majestic white presence, was not a separate entity to be called upon, but the deepest, truest part of herself. One afternoon, a young sentinel in training, no more than 16, was brought to the courtyard. He had been on perimeter duty when a corrupted, twisted creature, a leftover from Caspian's attack, had ambushed his patrol. His leg was badly mauled, the wounds livid and refusing to heal, tainted by shadow. The healers had done what they could, but a darkness lingered in the flesh, causing fever and agony. He was pale, sweating, his eyes full of pain. "Touch him," Theo instructed softly. "Not with your hands, but with your intention. Let the White Wolf's essence flow." Elara knelt beside the cot they'd placed in the courtyard. She was terrified. What if she failed? What if she hurt him? She placed her hands near the wound, not touching it, and closed her eyes. She reached for that inner well of calm, moonlit power. She thought not of fighting the darkness, but of reinforcing the light within the boy, of reminding his body of its own wholeness. A soft silver glow began to emanate from her palms, shimmering like sunlight on water. It drifted over the angry wound. The boy gasped. The blackened tendrils of corruption in his flesh seemed to writhe and then dissolve, retreating before the gentle light. The inflammation faded, the angry red turning to healthy pink. In minutes, the wound was closed, leaving only a fresh, clean scar. The boy sat up, flexing his leg, wonder on his young face. "The pain, it's gone. Thank you, my lady." Elara sat back on her heels, stunned. She had healed, not through force, but through presence. A profound sense of rightness settled over her. This was her power. This was her purpose. Later, she found Lysander on the citadel's highest parapet, staring north towards the jagged, snow-capped peaks where her brother hid. The wind tugged at his black hair. He looked like a king carved from sorrow and resolve. "You are remarkable," he said without turning, sensing her approach. The mate bond was a constant low hum between them now, a shared awareness. "I healed someone today," she said, coming to stand beside him, the vast landscape spread before them. "I felt it," he admitted, glancing at her.
a surge of peace through the bond. It is a strange feeling. I am accustomed to sensing rage, fear, battle lust in those around me, not peace. Is that all you feel from others? She asked quietly. For 2 centuries, it has been. A king is a target, a symbol. Love is a vulnerability my position could not afford. Trust was a currency too costly to spend. He finally looked at her fully, his gold eyes searching her gray ones. You crashed into my world, smelling of rain and destiny, with a baby in your arms and my mark on your skin. You are the greatest vulnerability I have ever faced, Elara Vance. His words should have felt like a rejection. Instead, she heard the unspoken truth beneath them. She was his vulnerability, and he had not cast her out. He had placed her under his protection, even from himself. The curse, the elders whispered. They say you are cursed, that you hurt those you love. A shadow deeper than any from Caspian cast over his face. He turned back to the mountains. It is not a story, it is a burden. 150 years ago, there was another. Her name was Elara. She was called Elara of the Sunlit Meadow. We were young. The bond was instantaneous, overwhelming. For 3 years she was my light, and for 3 years she faded, slowly, inexplicably. The strongest healers could find no illness. It was as if her very life force was being siphoned away. She died in my arms, whispering that she loved me still. His knuckles were white where they gripped the stone parapet. A rival clan, long destroyed, had placed a curse upon my bloodline, a corruption that twists the mate bond into a drain. It ensures the thorn line ends in solitude and heartbreak. I have fought any hint of a bond since that day. I built walls of ice and ruled with a fist of iron, because to love is to kill. The raw pain in his voice, so carefully concealed, broke something inside her. She didn't touch him, but she let her own calm, her newly discovered inner light, flow down the bond towards him. It was a gentle wave, not of pity, but of shared sorrow and unwavering presence. The white wolf lineage is one of purification, Lysander, she said softly. We heal broken magic, we cleanse corruption. What if I am not your curse, but your cure? He turned to her then, his eyes wide, a flicker of desperate, fragile hope in their golden depths. It was a hope he had forbidden himself longer than she had been alive. Do not offer me that, he whispered, his voice ragged. Do not make me hope if it means watching another light die because of me. I am not made of glass, she said, her own voice gaining strength. I am not a sunlit meadow. I am a winter storm. I have survived a lifetime of cold meant to break me. My power is life, and it is strong. Your brother's shadow could not touch it. Your curse will not consume it. She took a step closer, the wind whipping her hair around her face. We are going to face Caspian to save Leo and this kingdom. Let us also face this, together. For a long moment he was silent, his internal battle visible in the tension of his frame. Then slowly he reached out. He didn't take her hand, he simply let his fingers brush against the mark on her wrist. The golden and silver symbol flared warmly at his touch, and this time he did not pull away. He let the warmth travel up his arm, a sensation he had associated with loss for so long, now feeling curiously like renewal. Together, he echoed, the word a vow. Chapter 5. The March to Glacier's Heart. The war party departed at first light, a stark procession against the endless white. There were no grand banners, no blaring horns. This was a stealth mission, a surgical strike. 50 of Lysander's most elite sentinels, led by Commander Rylan, moved with a grim, silent efficiency. They traveled on foot and on sleek, armored snow sleds pulled by teams of powerful, silent-footed warwolves.
Elara moved among them, no longer a bystander. Dressed in fitted gray-white winter gear that blended with the landscape, she carried a weight of responsibility, not weapons. Leo was swaddled securely against her chest in a specially designed carrier, his violet eyes peering out curiously at the world. His presence was their compass. Lysander and Elara could both feel a faint pulling tether in the bond they shared with the child, a thread leading due north into the heart of the Dead Mountains. Lysander was a figure of focused intensity at the head of the column. The hope kindled on the parapet was locked away behind a mask of ruthless command. This was the Alpha King going to war, and every part of him was honed for the fight to come. The journey was a brutal test. The air grew thinner and colder, biting through even the warmest furs. Strange, distorted howls echoed from unseen valleys, mutated creatures drawn by Caspian's corrupting influence. They were set upon twice by packs of ice wraiths, creatures of living frost and malice. The sentinels fought with disciplined ferocity, their silver-edged blades flashing. Elara's role in these battles was defensive. When a wraith broke through the line, lunging for the soldiers guarding her, she did not scream. She stepped forward, placing herself between the creature and the men. She would raise her hands, and a pulse of that pure silver-white energy would flare from her. It didn't destroy the wraiths, but it disrupted them. Their forms would waver, their cold fury turning to confusion, making them easy targets for the sentinels' blades. She was a living ward, a bastion of light in the encroaching gloom.
The sentinels, initially wary of the wolfless girl turned mystical queen, began to look at her with a new respect. They saw not a burden, but a weapon of a different kind, a shield for their souls. On the third night, camped in the skeletal remains of a pine forest, Lysander found her sitting apart, feeding Leo a small bottle of warmed milk. The northern lights danced overhead in silent green ribbons. "You are holding up," he stated, kneeling beside her. "I have to," she replied, watching the lights reflect in the baby's eyes. "He needs me. They all do." "They would follow you," Lysander said quietly, nodding towards the sentinels sitting around their low fires. "Not just because of the mark, because of what you did today. You protected them with a power they do not understand, but they feel its truth." "I don't want them to follow me into death," she whispered, the fear finally surfacing. "Then we must ensure we win." He sat fully, his shoulder brushing hers. The contact sent the now familiar warmth through the bond. "The glacier's heart is a day's march from here. Caspian will know we are coming. The terrain will be his ally. Sheer cliffs of blue ice, crevices hidden by snow, constant avalanches, and his forces, they will not be mere wraiths." "What will they be?" "The lost," Lysander said, the word heavy. "Wolves and men whose minds and souls he has broken and reshaped with dark magic. They feel no pain, no fear. They are extensions of his will." Elara shuddered, holding Leo closer. "How do we fight something like that?" "We cut off the head," Lysander said, his voice grim. "We get to Caspian, you and I. The sentinels will create a diversion, engage his forces at the main gate. Rylan is a master tactician. He will draw their attention. While the fortress is looking outward, we will find another way in." "Another way?" "Every fortress has a weakness. Every tyrant has a secret door. The glacier's heart was built by our great-grandfather. There are schematics in the Citadel archives. There is a geothermal vent, a channel for hot springs that runs deep beneath the ice. It emerges in the lower dungeons. It will be guarded, but lightly. That is our path." The plan was audacious, suicidal, but it was the only way. The next afternoon, the fortress came into view. It was not a building, it was a mountain that had been sculpted into a nightmare. spikes of black ice thrust from its sides like spears. A palpable aura of wrongness emanated from it, making the very air taste of metal and decay. At its base was a massive gate of frozen iron, behind which shadows moved in unnerving numbers. Lysander gathered the sentinels for a final briefing in a hidden ice canyon. His words were short, direct. "Rylan, you have the gate. Make noise. Make them believe the full force of the Onyx Citadel is upon them. Do not take unnecessary risks. Your task is to distract and survive." Rylan bowed. "We will hold their gaze, sire." Lysander turned to Elara. "Ready?" She took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of her wolf beneath her skin, feeling the steady warmth of Leo against her chest, feeling the solid, unwavering presence of her mate through the bond. She was Elara Vance, the wolfless. She was the white wolf, the lost queen. She was a mother protecting her child. Ready. While Rylan's forces began their loud, deliberate approach, launching flares and creating a racket that echoed through the valleys, Lysander led Elara silently around the base of the mountain. They found the vent hidden behind a waterfall that was more ice than water, a curtain of frozen tears. Behind it was a dark, steaming tunnel, the air within thick and sulphurous. The passage was narrow, slick with mineral deposits, and climbed steeply upward through the heart of the glacier. The heat was oppressive, a stark contrast to the killing cold outside. The sounds of the distant diversion were muffled here, replaced by the drip of water and the thunder of their own hearts. They encountered only 2 guards, lost ones with blank eyes and slack jaws, stationed at a narrow choke point. Lysander dispatched them with silent, brutal efficiency before they could raise an alarm. Elara looked away, focusing on the warmth of Leo, on the light inside herself, distancing herself from the grim necessity. After an hour of tense climbing, the tunnel widened and the heat intensified. They emerged onto a metal grate overlooking a vast cavernous space deep within the mountain. It was the source of the heat, a bubbling geothermal lake of iridescent water, its steam rising to warm the entire fortress. Around the lake's edge were crude cages, and in those cages were prisoners. Dozens of them, men, women, some in tattered military uniforms, others in simple clothes. They were thin, hollow-eyed, but not yet lost. They stared listlessly at the steaming water. And on a raised dais overlooking this miserable scene, flanked by 2 hulking shadow beasts, stood Caspian. In his hand he held a chain, and at the end of that chain, crouched and shivering in a thin shift, was Lady Seraphina. Her beauty was gone, replaced by terror and exhaustion. "Ah!" Caspian's voice, amplified by the cavern, rang out. He wasn't looking at the prisoners. He was looking directly at the grate where Lysander and Elara hid. "Come down, little queen," he called, his voice echoing mockingly. "Let the people see their savior. Let them see the mighty white wolf who led the great Alpha King right into my trap." There was no point in hiding. Lysander pushed open the grate, and they descended a rusty metal staircase to the cavern floor. The prisoners in the cages stirred, a faint spark of desperate hope lighting in some of their eyes as they saw their king. Elara's focus was split, on Caspian, on the terrified Seraphina, and on a pulsating dark crystal apparatus set up behind the dais. It was hooked to pipes that siphoned steam from the geothermal lake, and at its core, suspended in a cage of dark energy, was a small familiar shape, a tiny lock of dark hair, a tiny blanket, items belonging to Leo. Caspian was using the child's residual energy, his psychic imprint, to power whatever nightmare he was building. "You're using him," Elara said, her voice cutting through the steamy air with a cold clarity she didn't feel. "A necessary tap," Caspian shrugged. "The prophet child's power is vast, but his body is so fragile. This is more efficient, and soon, when the alignment is perfect, the connection will be direct, and the final seal will shatter."
What seal? Lysander demanded, stepping slightly in front of Elara, his body a wall of tension.
The first seal, brother! Caspian spread his arms, his eyes cron-red. The one that binds the old ones, the primordial chaos that existed before wolf and man, before moon and sun. The world of order you cherish is a cage, a bland, predictable prison. I will break it open, let the storm of true power remake everything. He was utterly, terrifyingly insane. This wasn't about a throne, it was about annihilation. And what of her? Lysander nodded to Seraphina, who flinched. A lesson in ambition, Caspian said, yanking the chain. Seraphina cried out. I showed her true power. She is my witness, and soon she will be my first offering to the new dawn. You will do nothing, Lysander growled. This ends now. Oh, it does, Caspian agreed. He snapped his fingers. The two shadow beasts beside him lunged, not at Lysander, but at the cages holding the prisoners. Their shadowy claws tore through the metal bars. But first, Caspian grinned, entertain me. The prisoners, dozens of them, stumbled out, but they did not run to freedom. Their eyes, which had held a flicker of hope, suddenly glazed over, clouded with the same oily darkness that composed the beasts. Caspian's will washed over them, a visible wave of black energy. They turned, their movements jerky, and faced Lysander and Elara. They were not warriors. They were farmers, craftsmen, soldiers stripped of weapons. But now they were a wall of flesh, controlled by dark magic, their faces empty of everything but compelled hostility. Your move, King, Caspian taunted. Cut down your own people to get to me, or die trying to save them. The White Wolf's pacifist light should be particularly useless here. It was a sadistic, perfect trap. Lysander could not slaughter innocents, but those innocents would slaughter them if they didn't fight back. The controlled crowd began to shuffle forward, a slow, grim tide. Lysander shifted partially, claws extending, a snarl on his face, but his eyes were anguished. How do you fight a battle where every enemy is a victim? Elara's mind raced. Her purifying light, it worked on magical corruption, on the shadow beasts, on the taint and wounds. Could it work on this? Could it break Caspian's hold without harming the peoples themselves? There was no time to test. The first of the controlled men, a burly blacksmith, reached them, swinging a meaty fist. Lysander deflected the blow gently, shoving the man back without hurting him. But more were coming. They would be overwhelmed. Elara closed her eyes. She reached not for the aggressive, protective power of her wolf, but for the deep, calming, healing core she had discovered with Elder Theo. She thought of the meditation, of connecting to the pulse of life. She thought of Leo's innocent heart beating against her chest. She pushed that feeling outwards, not as a weapon, but as an invitation, a reminder. She began to glow. Not the fierce, blinding light of her transformation, but a soft, pervasive silver luminescence that radiated from her skin like mist. It spread through the steamy air, touching the advancing prisoners. Where the light touched them, they hesitated. The blank darkness in their eyes flickered. One woman, her face streaked with tears, stopped mid-step, looking at her own hands in confusion. The blacksmith shook his head like a dog shaking off water. Caspian's smirk faltered. What is this? Elara took a step forward, the light intensifying. I remind them of fear, of control, she said, her voice echoing strangely in the cavern. I remind them of themselves, of their families, of the sun on their faces. She poured more of her energy into the light, feeling a drain, but also a profound connection. She was not fighting them, she was remembering for them. One by one, the prisoners stopped. They blinked, looking around as if waking from a terrible dream. The oily darkness seeped out of their eyes, evaporating in Elara's silver glow. They saw the king. They saw the strange glowing woman. They saw the monster on the dais. A low moan of collective horror and realization rose from them. They stumbled back, clustering together, free but terrified.
Caspian's face twisted in rage. "Enough!" He threw a hand out, and a spear of solid black ice shot from his palm, aimed directly at Elara. Lysander was there. He didn't try to block it. He shoved Elara aside and took the spear in his shoulder. It punched through armor and flesh with a sickening thunk, pinning him to the cavern wall. "Lysander!" Elara screamed, the silvern light flickering. The king grunted in pain, but his gold eyes were blazing. "The crystal!" he gritted out, blood staining his lips. "The apparatus! Destroy it! It's the link to Leo!" Elara looked from her wounded mate to the pulsing dark crystal, to Caspian, who was already conjuring another spear. The prisoners were free, but they were defenseless. Seraphina was cowering. Ryland's diversion was still a distant rumble. They were out of time. Her wolf surged forward, not with gentle light, but with protective fury. The transformation was swift this time. The massive white wolf stood before Caspian, her silver-blue eyes fixed on the dark crystal. She could feel it now, a vile, sucking tendril of energy stretching out from it, through the mountain, seeking the innocent life tethered to her chest. Caspian hurled the second spear. The white wolf leapt, not to evade, but to intercept. She twisted in midair, taking the spear of black ice along her flank. It was a shallow wound, the dark magic sizzling against her pure light, but it hurt. She landed in front of the crystal apparatus, between it and Caspian. "You cannot break it with your pretty light, mutt," Caspian snarled, beginning a complex weaving of shadows with both hands, something bigger, more devastating. But Lysander, with a roar that shook the cavern, ripped himself off the wall, the ice spear still lodged in his shoulder. He shifted fully into the midnight wolf and launched himself at his brother, disrupting his attack. The two titanic beings, one of shadow, one of night, collided in a cataclysm of snarls and breaking stone. Elara held her focus. The beam from her mouth was draining her fast. The crystal was cracking, but so was she. She pushed harder, pouring every ounce of her will, her love for Leo, her newfound bond with Lysander, her purpose as the white wolf, into the light. With a sound like a universe sighing, the dark crystal exploded.
Not in a blast of force, but in a wave of silent, dissipating darkness. The sucking tendril to Leo snapped and vanished. The cage of energy around his belongings disappeared, and the small items fell harmlessly to the dais. The effect was immediate on Caspian. He staggered as if struck, the constant flow of stolen power he'd been siphoning cut off. His form wavered, the shadows that composed his enhanced abilities bleeding away, leaving him just a man. A powerful, mad alpha, but a man nonetheless. Lysander seized the moment. In a final, mighty surge, he pinned his brother to the ground, his massive jaws closing around Caspian's throat, not biting down, but holding him in a grip of absolute dominance. "It's over, Caspian," Lysander's voice echoed from the wolf's muzzle. Caspian stared up, his chaotic eyes clearing for a moment, showing not fear, but a profound, weary bitterness. You always were the guardian of the cage, brother." Then his eyes rolled back, and he fell unconscious, either from the broken connection or the shock of defeat. The white wolf shifted back. Elara collapsed to her knees, utterly spent, clutching and now crying Leo. The wound on her flank ached, but it was clean, already beginning to knit together. She looked over at Lysander, who was shifting back to human form, clutching his bleeding shoulder, standing over his fallen brother. The prisoners were sobbing, hugging each other. Seraphina stared blankly at the chain in her hands, then dropped it as if it were a serpent. They had won. The apparatus was destroyed. Caspian was captured. Leo was safe. But as Elara looked at the exhausted, wounded king, at the freed but broken people, at the depths of the mountain fortress still filled with who knew what other horrors, she knew one thing. The battle was over. The war for the kingdom's soul was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Weight of a Crown.
The return to the Onyx Citadel was not a victory march, but a somber procession of the wounded and the rescued. Lysander, his shoulder tightly bound but refusing a sled, walked at the head, a silent, imposing figure. Elara walked beside him, Leo asleep in a proper sling, her own minor wound healed but her energy reserves deeply depleted. Behind them came the 50 sentinels, fewer now by a dozen, escorting the shell-shocked prisoners and a tightly bound, unconscious Caspian carried on a litter. News of their return raced ahead of them. By the time the black gates came into view, a crowd had gathered, citizens, warriors, elders, all silent and watchful. They saw their stern king, wounded but unbent. They saw the strange young woman with the white streak now running through her dark hair from her temple, a permanent mark of her power's expenditure. They saw the sleeping child, and they saw the captured prince, the source of their fear. There were no cheers, only a deep collective exhale of a breath held too long, followed by a ripple of murmurs that spoke of relief, uncertainty, and awe. Elder Thea was waiting at the foot of the citadel steps. His old eyes swept them, missing nothing. He bowed low. "Welcome home, Your Majesty, my queen." The title, spoken so formally and publicly, sent a new kind of shiver through Elara. Queen. It was no longer a prophetic title or a mark on her skin. It was a reality she would have to live. The days that followed were a blur of counsels, healings, and grim decisions. Lysander's shoulder healed with preternatural speed, a testament to his alpha strength, but the deeper wound, the betrayal by his own brother, remained. Caspian was secured in the Citadel's deepest, most magically warded cell, a place designed to nullify power. He would stand trial before the unified Pax, a trial that would likely end in permanent exile or execution. The prisoners from the glacier's heart were cared for. Many had families who wept with joy at their return. Others had lost everything. Elara moved among them in the healing wards, her presence alone a balm to ease nightmares and mend spirits. The story of how she had freed them from Caspian's control without lifting a finger in violence spread through the citadel like wildfire, transforming the mystery of the White Wolf into a legend of mercy. Lady Seraphina was a different matter. She was placed under house arrest in her family's quarters within the citadel, her fate uncertain. Her ambition had made her a pawn for Caspian, and though she was a victim, her previous actions could not be ignored. It was a problem for another day. The most pressing issue was one of politics and legitimacy. Elara was the marked queen, the White Wolf returned. But she was also an unknown, a girl from a despised pack with no experience in ruling. The Council of Alphas, representatives from all the territories under the Thorned Crown, would be arriving within Leek to assess the situation, to see Caspian face justice, and to meet their purported queen. "They will test you," Lysander warned her one evening in his private study. Maps and reports were spread before him, but he wasn't looking at them. He was looking at her as she sat by the fire, rocking a drowsy Leo. "They will try to find weakness. Some will see your power as a threat. Others will see your gentleness as a flaw. They will question your birth, your worth, your right to stand beside me." "I know," Elara said softly, her eyes on the fire. The fear was there, a cold knot in her stomach, but a new feeling was there too, a quiet, solid determination. "I spent my life being tested by small, cruel people. I know how to stand when others want me to kneel. This is just a larger hall." A ghost of a smile touched Lysander's lips. "You continue to surprise me." He rose and came to stand by her chair, looking down at Leo. "He is the key to their acceptance as well. The prophet child chose you. That holds immense weight in our traditions." "He didn't choose a queen," Leo murmured, stroking the baby's cheek. "He chose someone to keep him safe. I just happened to be there."
Fate is rarely an accident, Lysander said. His hand came to rest on her shoulder, a warm, heavy weight. The bond between them hummed, no longer just an awareness, but a comfortable, steady connection. The curse he feared had not manifested. Her light had not dimmed in his presence. If anything, it had grown steadier, and the icy solitude that had gripped him for centuries had begun, ever so slightly, to thaw. You will see what I see, a strength that has nothing to do with fangs. The day of the Alpha Council arrived under a sky of hard, clear blue. The great hall was prepared, not with the opulence of Lysander's first audience, but with a solemn, martial dignity. Banners of all the packs lined the walls.
The elders were present, the sentinels stood at attention, and on the dais sat 2 thrones, the ancient, twisted, black iron throne of the Thorned Kings, and beside it a new one, crafted in the days since their return. It was made of pale silver wood, inlaid with mother-of-pearl that shimmered like moonlight, its back carved into the flowing shape of a howling white wolf. Elara, dressed in a gown of winter gray and silver, the mark on her wrist displayed openly, sat upon it. She felt like an impostor, a child playing dress-up on a stage too vast. In her lap, Leo cooed, playing with a silver medallion. Lysander sat beside her, a figure of unmovable authority in his black and gold. One by one, the Alphas were announced, huge, powerful men and women, scarred from battle, eyes sharp with intelligence and suspicion. They bowed to Lysander, their king. Then their eyes would turn to Elara, and the bows were shallower, the scrutiny intense. The proceedings began with Caspian's trial. He was brought in, shackled with silver and magic-dampening irons. He was calm, almost serene, his madness replaced by a chilling clarity. He did not deny his actions, he proclaimed them. He spoke of the weakness of order, the glory of chaos, his voice filling the hall with seductive, poisonous logic. Some of the younger, more restless Alphas listened with a disturbing fascination. When he was finished, the verdict was swift and unanimous: death. Caspian merely smiled, as if it were a minor inconvenience in a grand plan, and was led away. The hall was left in a shaken silence. Then the true test began. The alpha of the Iron Claw Pack, a grizzled old warrior named Gunnar, stepped forward. He was known for his bluntness and his distrust of anything not based on pure physical strength. "My king," he began, his voice a gravelly rumble, "the threat is ended, justice is served, we give thanks, but now we face a new situation." His eyes, like chips of flint, turned to Elara. "We are asked to accept a new queen, a girl from a pack of cowards who lived as a servant. She bears a mark, it is true, and stories are told of white light and healing. But what does that mean for the rest of us? The North is harsh. Our enemies are real. They are not defeated by pretty glows. They are defeated by strength, by the wolf. Can she even shift, or is she just a human with a trick?" It was the question everyone wanted to ask, laid bare with brutal honesty. All eyes were on Elara. Lysander tensed beside her, but she placed a calming hand on his arm. This was her battle. She stood up, carefully passing Leo to a waiting elder Theo. She walked down the 3 steps of the dais to stand on the same level as Gunnar. She was small before him, but she held her head high. "Alpha Gunnar," she said, her voice clear and carrying without shouting. "You are right, I was a servant. I know the weight of water buckets, the ache of scrubbing stone, the bite of winter with no coat. I know what it is to be weak, because I was surrounded by those who defined strength as the power to inflict such misery." She walked slowly along the line of watching Alphas. "You speak of the wolf. For 20 years I believed I had none, that I was broken. What I learned is that my wolf was not absent, she was waiting. She is not a beast of rage, though she can be fierce. She is a spirit of resilience, of memory.
She does not remind us how to fight, she reminds us why we fight. For our homes, for our pups, for the warmth of the hearth, not just the glory of the hunt. She stopped before Gunnar again, looking up into his hardened face. You ask if I can shift. She didn't look away. She let the power rise within her, not the blinding transformation, but the essence of it. Her gray eyes began to glow with that soft silver-blue light. A faint, shimmering aura, like heat haze in summer, outlined her form. The scent of vanilla and fresh rain, of a clean storm, filled the air, overpowering the musk of wolf and fur in the hall. It was the scent of the white wolf, of ancient, calming power. I am always shifted, Alpha Gunnar, she said softly. This is not a human with a trick. This is the wolf in the form that serves her purpose. My strength is not for dominating this hall. It is for making sure the halls of your homes are safe. My power is not for conquering you, but for healing the divisions an enemy like Caspian exploited. I fought him not with tooth and claw, but by reminding his victims of their own hearts. That is the strength I offer, the strength of a pack that does not break from within. She turned to address them all. I do not ask you to bow to me. I ask you to stand with me, with your king, to be the guardians our people need, in all the ways guardianship is required, not just with swords at the border, but with justice in our courts, with mercy for the wronged, and with light in the places shadows gather. She finished, the glow fading from her eyes. The hall was utterly silent. Gunnar stared at her for a long, long moment. Then, slowly, the gruff old Alpha did something no one expected. He bowed, not a shallow nod, but a deep, respectful bend at the waist. A wolf who knows her own nature is the strongest wolf of all, he rumbled. The Iron Claw pack acknowledges the white wolf. One by one, the other alphas followed, some with hesitation, some with newfound curiosity, but all with a respect that had not been there minutes before. Elara walked back to the dais, her legs trembling slightly now that it was over. As she sat, Lysander's hand found hers under the arm of his throne. His grip was tight, communicating what his regal face could not: pride, relief, a profound and grateful wonder. Later that night, on the same parapet where they had first truly spoken, Lysander stood with her under a canopy of stars. The mark on her wrist was cool against his palm where he held it. You were magnificent, he said simply. I was terrified, she admitted with a shaky laugh. That is what made it magnificent. He was quiet for a moment. The council has proposed a coronation ceremony in 1 month's time, at the full moon, to formally crown you as Luna Queen of the United Packs. The reality of it stole her breath. A coronation, a permanent place. And you, she asked, what does the king want? He turned to face her fully, the moonlight etching his sharp features in silver. The king, he said, his voice low and solemn, wants to build a kingdom worthy of its queen. He wants to be a king who rules not from a throne of fear, but from a heart that has been reminded of its purpose. He lifted her marked hand and pressed his lips lightly to the golden and silver symbol. It was not a kiss of passion, but one of fealty, of a vow. With you, Elara, I am not cursed. I am renewed. In the nursery below, Leo slept peacefully, no longer a prize to be won, but a child to be loved. In the dungeons, a fallen prince plotted in silence. And in the wide, watchful north, a new legend was being born, not of a lone king of ice, but of a king and queen of shadow and light, and the kingdom they would heal together. The story of the Omega in the snow was over. The legend of the White Wolf Queen had just begun. Chapter 8. Whispers in the Stone. The moon waxed fat and silver, counting down the days to the coronation. The onyx citadel, once a bastion of stark power, began to transform. Where before there were only banners of the black-thorned wolf, now new standards were woven, silver on gray, depicting the white wolf with her crescent moon sigil. Craftsmen from all territories arrived, not just warriors, but weavers, carpenters, and cooks, all contributing to the celebration. The air hummed with an anticipation that felt fragile, like the first crust of ice on a pond. Elara was swept into a whirlwind of preparations that had nothing to do with battle plans and everything to do with diplomacy, tradition, and fabric. She was measured for her coronation gown, a breathtaking creation of layered silver-gray silk and velvet, threaded with actual moonlight-caught pearls. She attended endless councils about ceremony, guest lists, and security. She learned the names and histories of 100 important alphas and their families, her mind a swirling map of alliances and old grudges. Through it all, Lysander was her anchor. His presence in the bond was a steady, reassuring warmth. He guided her through the political intricacies, his centuries of experience a quiet backdrop to her learning. They developed a silent language of looks and slight touches, a brush of his hand against her back as she entered a tense meeting, her calming energy flowing to him when a stubborn alpha tested his patience. It was a partnership, a dance of shadow and light, each learning the steps of the other. Yet, amid the growing hope, a chill lingered. Caspian, in his lightless cell, was silent. Too silent. No rants, no prophecies, no pleas, just a void that felt more threatening than his madness. Commander Rylan reported that the prince would sit for hours, staring at the wall, tracing patterns in the dust with his finger. Patterns that, when copied and shown to Elder Theo, resembled fragments of an archaic, forbidden script, a language of unraveling. "He is not broken," Theo warned them in a private meeting, his aged face grave. "A mind like his does not surrender, it plots. The destruction of his apparatus was a setback, not an end. He seeks another path." "The final seal he spoke of," Lysander mused, his fingers steepled. "We must learn what it is, where it is. All our histories, every archive must be searched." Elara, holding a sleepy Leo, felt a fresh dread. He said Leo was the key, that his power was needed to break it. "Was the connection severed when you destroyed the crystal?" Lysander said, but his eyes were troubled. "Was it?" Elder Theo asked softly. "Or was the tether merely cut? The child still carries the prophet's power within him. The key is not lost because the lockpick is broken. It merely requires a different tool." The implication hung in the air, cold and sharp. Caspian needed Leo, or his essence, and while the child was protected by the entire might of the Onyx Citadel and by a queen whose very nature was a shield, a desperate, brilliant mind in a cell with nothing but time was a danger of a different kind. The chill seeped into Elara's dreams. She would see visions of vast, formless things stirring in deep places, of ancient stone cracking, of a silence so profound it was a scream. She would wake with her mark pulsing, not with warmth, but with a low, warning throb. She began to walk the citadel at night, Leo in her arms, drawn to its oldest, quietest places. One such night she found herself in the Hall of Ancestors, a long, narrow gallery lined with stone effigies of past kings and queens. The air was still and dusty. At the very end was the oldest statue, worn nearly smooth with time, the first king who was said to have made a pact with the moon itself to bring order to the wild world. As she stood before the statue, Leo fussing softly, Elara felt a pull, not from the bond, but from the stone itself, a faint whispering vibration through the soles of her boots. She knelt, placing her free hand on the cold floor. Closing her eyes, she pushed her awareness out, using the techniques Elder Theo had taught her not to heal, but to listen. The citadel was built on a nexus of ley lines, channels of the earth's natural magic. She could feel them, rivers of power flowing deep below, but one felt wrong. It was a thread of energy that felt stagnant, poisoned, like a root choked with rot, and it led away from the citadel, deep into the northern mountains, towards a place that felt hollow. "You feel it too," she gasped, stumbling to her feet. Lysander stood in the archway, his form blending with the shadows. He wasn't surprised to find her here. "What is it?" she asked, her heart pounding. "A sickness in the land," he said, walking to her side. He placed his hand over hers on the floor. Through their touch, the bond flared, and the sensation intensified. The poisoned ley line felt like a cold needle in her mind. "A sickness in the land," he said, walking to her side. He placed his hand over hers on the floor. Through their touch, the bond flared, and the sensation intensified. The poisoned ley line felt like a cold needle in her mind. "A sickness in the land," he said, walking to her side. He placed his hand over hers on the floor. Through their touch, the bond flared, and the sensation intensified. The poisoned ley line felt like a cold needle in her mind. The scholars called it the world scar, a flaw in the continent's magical bedrock. They believed it stable, contained. "Caspian seal," Elara breathed. Lysander nodded grimly. "I believe so. Not a man-made lock, but a natural magical containment on a wound in reality. The prophecy of the Child of Winter wasn't about using his power to break something. It was about his power being the perfect catalyst. His pure, unconsumed life force could be used to overwhelm the fragile stability of the scar, to cause a catastrophic rupture." He looked down at Leo, his expression haunted. "My brother doesn't want to rule a broken world. He wants to unmake the patch so the wound can bleed freely." The coronation, the celebration, the unification, it all suddenly felt like decorating a house built on a crumbling cliff edge. "We have to find it," Elara said. "We have to heal it." "Healing a continental scar is not like healing a wound," Lysander said, his voice heavy. "The magic required, Elara, it is the work of gods or of generations." "Then we find another way to reinforce it," she insisted, the stubbornness that had kept her alive in the Shadowfang pack rising within her. "We can't just wait for him to find a new tool." A new voice, thin and rasping, spoke from the darkness of the gallery. "The tool is not what you think." Both of them whirled. In the doorway stood a frail figure wrapped in a plain shawl, Lady Seraphina. Her beauty was gone, eroded by terror and guilt, leaving behind a gaunt, haunted woman. The guards behind her looked uneasy. She had begged to speak to the queen, claiming she had information, and Elara had given orders to be notified if she did. "Speak," Lysander commanded, his tone leaving no room for deception. Seraphina flinched, but did not look away from Elara. "In the glacier's heart, when he held me, he talked, not to me, but to himself, to the shadows. He was excited. When you destroyed the crystal, he was furious, but then he laughed." She swallowed, her throat working. "He said, 'The key is dual-natured. If the lockpick is denied, the lock itself will suffice.' I didn't understand then." Elara's blood ran cold. The lock itself. The world scar is a flaw, a rupture. To break it open, you need a massive, focused release of chaotic energy, a prophet's soul. But to destabilize it, to weaken it enough for other forces to seep through, you might only need a powerful, concentrated burst of magic in the wrong place, a catalyst of a different kind. Seraphina nodded, her eyes wide with remembered fear. "He kept asking about the coronation, about the convergence of legacies. He said when the moon is highest and the new queen is crowned, when the old power and the new are symbolically joined, the ley lines beneath the citadel will sing with alignment. It will be a moment of immense vulnerability, a surge of natural magic." "He doesn't need Leo anymore," Elara whispered, horror dawning. "He needs us, the ceremony. He plans to use the energy of the coronation itself to twist it and channel it into the poisoned ley line, to shock the world scar into rupturing." The pieces clicked into place with terrible clarity. Caspian's silence, his apparent surrender.
He wasn't plotting an escape. He was waiting for them to deliver everything he needed right to his doorstep, wrapped in tradition and celebration. Lysander's face was a mask of stormy fury. He is still in his cell. He is powerless, warded. Is he? Elder Theo's voice came from the other end of the hall. The old historian shuffled forward, his face pale. The scripts he has been drawing are not just words, they are diagrams, schematics, of the Citadel's own wardstones. He is not trying to break out, he is learning how to turn the wards inward, to use the Citadel's own protective magic as a focusing lens for the ceremonial energy. The Hall of Ancestors, a place of silent history, now felt like the eye of a gathering storm, their greatest moment of unity being engineered into their point of annihilation. "We cancel the coronation," Elara said immediately. "We cannot," Lysander replied, his tone tight. "The Alphas are already arriving. To cancel without explanation would cause panic, sow distrust, fracture the very unity we need to face this. It would look like weakness, or worse, that we are afraid of our own ceremony. Caspian would win without lifting a finger." "Then we change the game," Elara said, her fear hardening as resolve. She looked at the ancient statue of the first king, then at the living king beside her, and finally at the child in her arms, the past, the present, and the future. "We proceed, but we do so not in ignorance, but as a trap of our own. We let him think his plan is unfolding, and we use the same convergence, the same alignment of power, not to break the world, but to heal it." "You just said it was the work of gods," Lysander said. "I am the White Wolf," she said, and for the first time the title felt not like a burden, but like a truth. "My power is purification, healing, connection. If a poisoned ley line can be used as a weapon, perhaps a purified one can be a suture." She turned to Elder Theo. "We need to know everything about the world scar, its exact location, its nature, and we need to know the original pact the first king made. There must be a reason the Citadel was built here, on this nexus." Hope, fierce and desperate, flickered in the old man's eyes. "The archives. There are sealed chambers, writings deemed too dangerous. The original compact may be there." "Find it," Lysander ordered. "Rylan." The commander appeared instantly from the shadows. "Triple the guard on Caspian's cell, but make it discreet. He must believe we are oblivious. And summon the master wardsmiths. We need to understand exactly how our protections could be turned against us." As Rylan hurried away and Theo shuffled off towards the deepest libraries, Lysander turned to Elara. In the dim light, his gold eyes gleamed. "You would risk the very moment meant to secure your throne to save the throne itself." "It's not about a throne," she said, looking down at Leo's peaceful face. "It's about his future. It's about all their futures." She met his gaze. "You told me we do this together, so we fight this battle together, not with claws in a cavern, but with will in a ceremony. We use his trap as our stage." A slow, fierce smile touched Lysander's lips, the kind that doubtless preceded his greatest victories. "Then let us prepare, my queen, for a coronation the world will never forget." Chapter 9. The Compact of Stone and Starlight. The following days were a study in controlled duality. On the surface, the Onyx Citadel was a beacon of joyous preparation. Banners fluttered, halls were cleaned and decorated, the kitchens produced smells of roasting meats and baking sweets. Elara was seen in public, serene and smiling, discussing flowers and music with the planning committee, holding audiences with curious, respectful alphas. Beneath the surface, a silent war was waged in shadows and scrolls. Elder Theo, looking older and more exhausted by the hour, finally emerged from the sealed archives 3 days before the coronation.
In Lysander's most secure strategy room, with only Elara, Rylan, and the two most trusted wardsmiths present, Theo laid the tablets on the table. The first king was not just a warrior, he was a binder, a weaver. In the time of chaos, when the Old Ones, formless beings of primal energy, raged across the land, he did not defeat them in battle. He could not. Instead, with the blessing of the moon goddess, he performed a great binding.
He pointed to the largest tablet, which showed a stylized wolf howling at a crescent moon, its light pinning writhing shadows to the ground. He used the natural ley lines of the continent as threads. He drew the chaotic energies of the Old Ones into a single deep fissure in the northern mountains, the place we call the World Scar. Then he wove a net of celestial and earthly magic over it, a seal anchored at 12 points across the land. This citadel, he tapped the table, was built on the primary anchor, the keystone. The pact was this: so long as a thorned king ruled with strength and maintained the keystone, and so long as the lines of power remained balanced, the seal would hold. Balanced how? Lysander asked, leaning over the tablet. The magic is dual-natured, Theo explained. Earth and sky, strength and spirit, king and, he looked at Elara, queen. The original lore speaks of a Luna's hand, a consort of pure heart who would act as a conduit for the celestial half of the power. For centuries, the kings ruled alone, the seal maintained by sheer force of will, slowly straining. This, perhaps, is the true source of the so-called curse on your line, sire. Not a spell by rivals, but the slow drain of upholding a fractured pact alone. The room was silent as the implications sank in. The curse wasn't a malicious spell, it was a systemic flaw. Lysander had been trying to power a mechanism designed for two all by himself. The White Wolf lineage, Elara said slowly. We are the Luna's hand? You are the embodiment of it, Theo said, wonder in his voice. Your ancestors were the goddess's chosen guardians, the keepers of the celestial balance. Your power doesn't just heal people, it harmonizes magic. The prophecy of the Child of Winter revealing the mother of the kingdom, it wasn't about royalty, it was about the key to the seal. Leo's power identified you because you are the missing component, the luck recognizing its key. The pieces fell together with an almost audible click. Caspian, in his studies of forbidden magic, must have learned of the true nature of the world scar. He knew breaking it required overwhelming the seal. He sought Leo's power as a battering ram, but when that was denied, he saw a subtler, crueler option: exploit the coronation. The moment a true king and queen, a balanced pair, symbolically took power, the ancient pact would be at its most active, the ley lines humming. If he could poison that surge, twist the celestial energy Elara represented into a weapon instead of a bomb, he could shock the fragile seal into failing. So we don't just need to stop him, Elara summarized, her mind racing. We need to complete the pact. We need to use the coronation not for a symbol, but for the actual magical act of reinforcing the seal, with both of us together. It is a ritual of immense risk, one of the wardsmiths, a gnarled old woman named Kaylin, spoke up. Her fingers were stained with arcane inks. We have studied Caspian's drawings. He has found a way to create a sympathetic link from his cell to the central wardstone in the citadel's foundation. At the peak of the ceremony, he plans to sacrifice his own life force, a thorn's life force, tainted by dark magic, into the link. It will act like a drop of poison in the heart of the convergence. The resulting shockwave through the ley lines would be catastrophic. Can we stop the link? Rylan asked. Disabling it would alert him, Kaylin shook her head, and his magic is cunning, he may have backups. But we can change the link, redirect it. How? Lysander demanded. The other wardsmith, a younger man with intense eyes, spoke.
The Wardstone network is like a circulatory system. He plans to inject poison into the heart. We can, with the Majesty's help, prepare a filter, a conduit of pure white wolf energy around the central stone. When his sacrifice hits, it will not flow into the ley lines. It will be captured, purified by the Queen's power, and then, with the King's strength to guide it, we can attempt to channel it not into the world scar, but into healing the primary anchor point here at the Citadel. You're talking about using my brother's death to power a healing ritual, Sire said, his voice flat. It is poetic justice in a dark way, and it may be the only way. The seal has been weak for generations. A surge of power, even power born of betrayal, focused through the proper channels, could revitalize the keystone, buying us centuries of stability, time to truly heal the land. The plan was audacious, fragile, and terrifying. It required perfect timing, immense control from Elara, and absolute trust. They would have to stand before the entire assembled kingdom, performing the most important ritual of their lives, while secretly conducting a magical operation of continental significance, all while a madman in the basement tried to murder the world. Elara looked at Lysander. The weight in his eyes was monumental. He would have to channel the purified, chaotic energy of his brother's suicidal attack. He would have to hold the line. She would have to be the flawless filter, the unwavering source of light. "We can do this," she said, and it was not a question of ability, but a statement of fact. She reached across the table, not for his hand, but for his wrist, her fingers covering the pulse point. She let her calm, her certainty, her trust in him flow down the bond. He turned his hand, capturing hers, his grip firm. The fear in his eyes was not for himself, but for her, for the kingdom, but beneath it was the unshakable resolve of the king. Then we remake the pact, not of stone and starlight, but of shadow and light, together. Chapter 10. The Eve of Convergence. The eve of the coronation dawned clear and bitterly cold, the sun a pale coin in a steel-blue sky. A hushed, expectant stillness had settled over the onyx citadel, thicker than the frost on its black walls. The final preparations were complete. The great courtyard was transformed into an amphitheater, with tiers of seating overlooking a central dais of polished obsidian. The 2 thrones stood waiting. Elara spent the morning in the royal nursery, a sunlit room that felt a world away from the tension below. Leo, now more active, giggled as she played with him, his violet eyes crinkling with joy. She held him close, breathing in his sweet, milky scent, memorizing the feel of his small, sturdy body. He was the reason for all of this, her first, most important duty. "You will be safe," she whispered to him, kissing his forehead. She had given strict, private orders to a hand-picked group of sentinels led by Ryland's most trusted lieutenant.
At the first sign of real trouble, they were to take Leo and a select group of non-combatants through a secret passage to a fortified lodge deep in the southern woods. It was a contingency she prayed they wouldn't need, but it let her face the coming day with a slightly lighter heart. In the afternoon, she walked the citadel grounds with Lysander. It was a public display of unity, a chance for the gathered packs to see their future rulers calm and confident. They nodded to alphas, accepted blessings from elders, smiled at wide-eyed children. The bond between them was a quiet hum, a channel of mutual reassurance. They spoke little, their communication flowing through touches and glances. "The wardsmiths are ready." His thought brushed against her mind, a skill they were refining. "The filter is in place," she responded silently, feeling the subtle humming lattice of her own power she had woven around the citadel's heartstone deep below. It was like holding a second massive heartbeat within her awareness. He is quiet, too quiet. He is waiting for his moment, as are we. As dusk painted the sky in shades of violet and rose, Elara retreated to her chambers to prepare for the evening's feast, the final gathering before the ceremony. Her maids helped her into a gown of deep blue, the color of the twilight sky, trimmed with silver that matched the streak in her hair. As they worked, a soft knock came to the door. It was Elder Theo, looking even more ancient and solemn. He carried a long, narrow chest of dark wood. "A gift, my queen," he said, his voice grave, "or perhaps a return of what is rightfully yours." He opened the chest. Inside, resting on velvet the color of midnight, was a circlet. It was not the heavy, bejeweled crown she would wear tomorrow. This was simpler, older. It was made of woven silver so fine it seemed spun from starlight, and set at its center was a single teardrop-shaped moonstone that glowed with a soft inner radiance. "The Luna's circlet," Theo breathed, "worn by the consorts of the first kings, lost for 500 years. I found it in the deepest vault, behind the tablets. It called to me when I touched the compact." Elara reached out, her fingers hovering above it. She felt a pull, a resonance that vibrated in her very bones. It felt like an extension of her mark, of her wolf. "It's beautiful." "It is more than ornament. It is a focus. It will help you channel your power tomorrow, to maintain the filter and guide the light. Please wear it tonight. Let the citadel, let the very stones remember its presence." With trembling hands, Elara lifted the circlet. It was cool, lighter than air. She placed it on her brow. The moment it touched her skin, a jolt of pure, clean energy shot through her, aligning with the power coiled in her core. Her senses sharpened. She could feel the flow of the Li lines more clearly, the pulse of every living thing in the citadel, the deep, slow breathing of the mountains. And she could feel the toxic knot of the world scar, a dull H in the north, and the fragile, shimmering net of her own power wrapped around the keystone below. She gasped, her eyes flying open. They reflected the moonstone's glow, shining silver blue. Theo bowed deeply, his tears in his old eyes. "It remembers you, daughter of the moon." The feast that night was a grand, roaring affair in the great hall. Firelight blazed, music played, tables groaned with food. The Alphas were in high spirits, toasting the future, the defeat of Caspian, the new era. Elara sat beside Lysander, the Luna's circlet gleaming on her brow, a quiet beacon amid the noise. She smiled, nodded, ate a little, but her attention was divided, listening to the symphony of energies only she could hear. Lysander was a pillar of calm authority, but through the bond she felt the steel trap of his focus, the king assessing his kingdom, watching for any flicker of the betrayal they knew was coming. His eyes would occasionally meet hers, and in that glance was a world of understanding. As the feast drew to a close, Gunnar, the Ironclaw Alpha, lumbered to his feet, his tankard raised. "A final toast," he boomed, the hall quieting. "To the king, may his strength never waver," a roar of agreement. "And to the queen," his flinty eyes softened as they found Elara. "To the white wolf, may her light show us the path when our own eyes are blinded by pride or fear." The toast was taken up with fervor. Elara felt a rush of gratitude, not for the praise, but for the acceptance. These hardened warriors were placing their faith in a different kind of strength. It gave her courage. Later, on the parapet once more, the cacophony of the feast replaced by the infinite silence of the star-strewn night, Elara and Lysander stood side by side. The circlet was cool on her forehead, the mark warm on her wrist. "Tomorrow," she said softly. "Tomorrow," he agreed. He didn't look at her, his gaze on the northern horizon where the world scar festered. "Whatever happens, know this, Elara. You have already given this kingdom more than I dared hope for. You have given me—" He trailed off, the words perhaps too vast for even a king to speak. You have given me the same, she finished for him, leaning her shoulder lightly against his arm. The contact was electric and comforting. He finally looked down at her, and in the moonlight, the ice in his gold eyes had melted completely, revealing a depth of feeling that stole her breath. He raised a hand and gently, so gently, traced the line of the circlet on her brow, his fingers brushing her temple. "Then let us go and defend it," he whispered. They stood in silence for a long time, two figures against the vast cold night, drawing strength from each other, preparing to face the dawn that would decide everything. Chapter 11: Crown of Shadow and Light. The day of the coronation arrived with a sky of flawless, aching blue. The cold was knife-sharp, but the sun shone, glittering off the snow and ice, making the black citadel look like a jewel set in diamond. From first light, the courtyard began to fill. Pack members from every territory, dressed in their finest furs and colors, found their seats. The air buzzed with a solemn excitement, the weight of history palpable. Deep within the citadel, in the chamber above the keystone wardstone, Elara finished her preparations. Her coronation gown was a masterpiece of subtle power. The silver-gray fabric seemed to shift in the light, sometimes the color of mist, sometimes of storm clouds. The pearls sewn into it caught the light and held it, making her seem to glow from within. The luna's circlet rested on her brow, the moonstone pulsing gently in time with her heart. The mark on her wrist was a constant, warm presence.
Lysander entered, already dressed in his formal regalia, black armor polished to a mirror shine, the fur-trimmed cape, the simpler, brutal crown of the thorned kings resting on a velvet pillow beside him. He looked every inch the warrior king, but his eyes, when they found her, held only a quiet, fierce pride. "It is time," he said, his voice low. She took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the lattice of her power humming below them, feeling the eager, poisoned link waiting in Caspian's cell, feeling the expectant energy of thousands above. "I'm ready." The procession was a silent, stately affair. They walked side by side through the inner torch-lit halls, past ranks of sentinels standing at rigid attention. Elder Theo, in his finest robes, waited at the doors to the courtyard, the ancient stone tablets of the compact resting on a draped altar before him. As the great doors swung open, a blast of cold air and a wave of sound hit them. Thousands of faces turned, and a hush fell, broken only by the snapping of banners in the wind. The path to the obsidian dais seemed miles long. They walked it together, their steps measured. Elara kept her head high, her gaze fixed ahead, but she was acutely aware of everything. She felt the hopeful curiosity of the common folk, the calculating assessment of the alphas, the loving, anxious pulse from the nursery where Leo was kept safe. And deep below, she felt the dormant poison, a sleeping serpent about to strike. They reached the dais and turned to face the assembly. Elder Theo stepped forward, his voice amplified by the natural acoustics of the courtyard and a touch of magic. "People of the United Pacts, we gather under the winter sun at a turning of the age. Before you stands your king, Lysander of the line of Thorn, who has guarded you with strength and sacrifice." Lysander inclined his head slightly, his face an impassive mask. "And beside him," Theo's voice swelled with emotion, "stands Elara of the line of Vance, the white wolf returned, marked by fate and child, the Luna's hand made flesh." A murmur full of awe rippled through the crowd. "Today, we do not merely crown rulers. Today, we witness the renewal of an ancient compact, a pact between king and queen, between strength and spirit, between earth and sky, to safeguard this land for all generations." He gestured to the tablets. "By the authority of the first compact, and by the will of the people gathered, we proceed." The first part of the ceremony was traditional, oaths of fealty from the major alphas, each coming forward to kneel and pledge their packs anew to the united crown. Gunnar was first, his pledge gruff and sincere. Each oath sent a ripple of stabilizing energy through the gathering, tightening the symbolic unity. As this happened, Ilana split her focus. On the surface, she accepted the pledges with a gracious nod. Beneath, she held the filter of her power in a vice grip. She could feel the ley lines beneath the citadel beginning to stir, responding to the ritual, aligning like gears in a great clock. The convergence was building. Finally, it was time. Theo lifted the thorned crown. "Lysander Thorn, do you swear to rule with strength tempered by wisdom, to be the shield of your people, the guardian of the land, the unwavering stone upon which this kingdom rests?" "I swear it." Lysander's voice rang out, clear and absolute. A surge of raw, earthy power emanated from him, grounding the swirling energies. Theo placed the heavy crown on his head. A collective breath was released. Then Theo turned. He lifted the new crown, the silverwood and mother-of-pearl diadem shaped like the white wolf. "Elara Vance, do you swear to rule with compassion forged in resilience, to be the heart of your people, the healer of the land, the guiding light in this kingdom's darkest hours?" Elara met Theo's eyes, then swept her gaze over the silent thousands. This was it, the moment of maximum vulnerability. The convergence peaked. The ley lines sang a note only she could hear. Lysander entered, already dressed in his formal regalia, black armor polished to a mirror shine, the fur-trimmed cape, the simpler, brutal crown of the thorned kings resting on a velvet pillow beside him. He looked every inch the warrior king, but his eyes, when they found her, held only a quiet, fierce pride. "It is time," he said, his voice low. She took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the lattice of her power humming below them, feeling the eager, poisoned link waiting in Caspian's cell, feeling the expectant energy of thousands above. "I'm ready." The procession was a silent, stately affair. They walked side by side through the inner torch-lit halls, past ranks of sentinels standing at rigid attention. Elder Theo, in his finest robes, waited at the doors to the courtyard, the ancient stone tablets of the compact resting on a draped altar before him. As the great doors swung open, a blast of cold air and a wave of sound hit them. Thousands of faces turned, and a hush fell, broken only by the snapping of banners in the wind. The path to the obsidian dais seemed miles long. They walked it together, their steps measured. Elara kept her head high, her gaze fixed ahead, but she was acutely aware of everything. She felt the hopeful curiosity of the common folk, the calculating assessment of the alphas, the loving, anxious pulse from the nursery where Leo was kept safe. And deep below, she felt the dormant poison, a sleeping serpent about to strike. They reached the dais and turned to face the assembly. Elder Theo stepped forward, his voice amplified by the natural acoustics of the courtyard and a touch of magic. "People of the United Pacts, we gather under the winter sun at a turning of the age. Before you stands your king, Lysander of the line of Thorn, who has guarded you with strength and sacrifice." Lysander inclined his head slightly, his face an impassive mask. "And beside him," Theo's voice swelled with emotion, "stands Elara of the line of Vance, the white wolf returned, marked by fate and child, the Luna's hand made flesh." A murmur full of awe rippled through the crowd. "Today, we do not merely crown rulers. Today, we witness the renewal of an ancient compact, a pact between king and queen, between strength and spirit, between earth and sky, to safeguard this land for all generations." He gestured to the tablets. "By the authority of the first compact, and by the will of the people gathered, we proceed." The first part of the ceremony was traditional, oaths of fealty from the major alphas, each coming forward to kneel and pledge their packs anew to the united crown. Gunnar was first, his pledge gruff and sincere. Each oath sent a ripple of stabilizing energy through the gathering, tightening the symbolic unity. As this happened, Elara split her focus. On the surface, she accepted the pledges with a gracious nod. Beneath, she held the filter of her power in a vice grip. She could feel the ley lines beneath the citadel beginning to stir, responding to the ritual, aligning like gears in a great clock. The convergence was building. Finally, it was time. Theo lifted the thorned crown. Lysander Thorn, do you swear to rule with strength tempered by wisdom, to be the shield of your people, the guardian of the land, the unwavering stone upon which this kingdom rests? I swear it. Lysander's voice rang out, clear and absolute. A surge of raw, earthy power emanated from him, grounding the swirling energies. Theo placed the heavy crown on his head. A collective breath was released. Then Theo turned. He lifted the new crown, the silver wood and mother-of-pearl diadem shaped like the white wolf. Elara Vance, do you swear to rule with compassion forged in resilience, to be the heart of your people, the healer of the land, the guiding light in this kingdom's darkest hours? Elara met Theo's eyes, then swept her gaze over the silent thousands. This was it, the moment of maximum vulnerability. The convergence peaked. The ley lines sang a note only she could hear, a chord waiting to be played or shattered. I swear it. And her voice, though quieter, carried on the same magic, ringing with a pure silver tone. As Theo moved to place the crown on her head, she felt it. A jolt of pure, violent malice from deep below, a psychic scream of triumph and sacrifice. Caspian. The poisoned link in his cell activated. He had timed it perfectly, the exact nanosecond the crown would touch her brow, the moment the symbolic act completed the circuit of the ancient pact. A torrent of black, chaotic energy, fueled by a thorn's life and will, surged up through the citadel's wards, aiming straight for the keystone, aiming to poison the convergence and shatter the world scar. But it hit her filter. The world did not dissolve into noise for Elara. It narrowed to a single, excruciating point of pressure. The dark energy slammed into the lattice of white wolf power she had woven. It was like trying to hold back a tsunami with a net of light. Agony, cold and sharp, ripped through her. The circlet on her head blazed, the moonstone turning blinding white. She cried out, a sound lost in the sudden gasping surprise of the crowd who saw only their...
With a guttural shout that echoed across the mountains, he didn't try to contain the power. He directed it. Down, through his connection to the citadel, through the keystone, not into the poisoned ley line leading to the scar, but into the keystone itself. The ground trembled, not a violent quake, but a deep, resonant hum, as if a giant plucked a string within the earth. A pillar of blended light, silver from Elara, gold from Lysander, shot up from the dais, not into the sky, but down, through the stone, into the heart of the mountain. In the courtyard, people cried out, stumbling, but there was no destruction. The light was warm, benevolent. It washed over them, and where it touched, a feeling of profound peace, of deep-rooted safety settled over the crowd. The very stones of the onyx citadel seemed to sigh, centuries of strain easing. And far to the north, in the silent, dead valley where the world scar lay, the stagnant, poisoned ley line did not rupture. Instead, it flashed with that same blended light. The corruption at its source, at the keystone, had been burned away, if only for now. The scar remained, but the net over it, the ancient seal, glimmered with renewed strength, reinforced by the completed pact, by a king and queen working in true harmony. On the dais, the light faded. Elara sagged, the world tilting. Lysander caught her,
holding her upright, his own body trembling with exertion. The crowns on their heads still gleamed, but now they seemed less like separate objects and more like parts of a whole. The silence in the courtyard was absolute. No one understood what they had just witnessed, only that it had been monumental, holy, and terrifying. Elder Theo, tears streaming openly down his wrinkled face, stepped forward. His voice, when he found it, was thick with emotion. "The compact is renewed." The words broke the spell. A roar erupted from thousands of throats, not of confused fear, but of dazed, overwhelming joy and relief. They had felt the rightness of it in their bones. Lysander looked down at Elara in his arms. Her face was pale, exhausted, but her eyes, silver blue and clear, looked up at him. A weary, triumphant smile touched her lips. "Together," she whispered. He pulled her close, not in a kiss, but in an embrace of absolute solidarity, of shared victory and unimaginable relief, as the united packs cheered for their king and queen, for the shadow and the light, for the new age that had truly, finally begun. Chapter 12. The First Dawn. The world after the coronation was not the same. It was quieter, deeper. The very air in the Onyx Citadel felt different, lighter, charged with a potential that was calm rather than tense. The frantic energy of impending doom was gone, replaced by the steady hum of a heart beating strongly in a healed chest. Elara slept for nearly a full day after the ceremony, her body and spirit utterly spent. When she awoke in her sunlit chamber, it was to the feeling of a small, warm weight on her chest. Leo was curled there, sleeping peacefully, guarded by a silent, watchful Lysander who sat in a chair by the bed. He was out of his armor, dressed simply, the thorned crown absent. He looked more like a man than a king, and more tired than she had ever seen him. "He didn't want to be anywhere else," Lysander said softly, seeing her eyes open, "and frankly, neither did I." She smiled, a slow, genuine feeling that started in her heart. "Is it over?" he asked. "The immediate threat is," he said, reaching over to stroke Leo's downy head. "Caspian is gone. His life force was the catalyst. The wardsmiths report the keystone is stable, resonating with strength it hasn't known in a millennium. The poisoned ley line is cleansed, at least from our end. The world scar is sealed, reinforced, not healed, but patched with something stronger than before. And the people?" "In awe," he said, a faint smile touching his own lips, confused but in awe. The story spreading is that the coronation ritual itself triggered a blessing from the moon goddess, a sign of favor for our union. It's not entirely wrong. His smile faded slightly. "Gunnar cornered me, said he felt the earth itself sigh in relief. He knows it was more than pageantry." Elara sagged up carefully, cradling Leo. "What now?" "Now," Lysander said, leaning forward, his golden eyes earnest, "we build, not just a kingdom that doesn't fall apart, but one that thrives. The Alphas are staying. They want to talk, to plan, not for war, but for trade routes, for shared healing centers, for how your white wolf acolytes, and they will come, mark my words, can help cleanse other places of residual darkness." He took her free hand. "You have given them a new vision of strength, Elara, one that includes healing the land as well as defending it." The days that followed were a whirlwind of a different sort. Councils were held, but the tone had shifted from suspicion to collaborative energy. Elara, with Leo often in a sling against her chest, attended them all. Her presence was a calming influence. When debates grew heated, a gentle pulse of her power, a mere hint of that silver light, would ease tempers and clear minds. She wasn't dictating, she was facilitating, helping them find their own common ground. She also began her new duty in earnest, In a sun-drenched wing of the citadel, she established the first true healing sanctuary. It was open to all: warriors with old wound taints, mothers with sick children, elders with aching joints. She didn't heal them all herself. That would have drained her utterly. Instead, she worked with the citadel's healers, teaching them to channel the cleaner, more harmonious energy now flowing through the place. She became a teacher, her power magnifying their skills. One afternoon, a young sentinel was brought in. He had been part of Ryland's force at the glacier's heart and taken a deep wound from a shadow beast. The physical injury had healed, but a lingering chill had settled in his soul, a depression and anxiety the medics couldn't touch. He barely spoke, his eyes distant. Elara sat with him in a quiet room filled with plants. She didn't probe or push. She simply sat in silence, letting her natural aura of peace fill the space. She hummed an old lullaby her mother had sung. Slowly, the young man began to relax. Tears welled in his eyes, not of pain, but of release. The cold knot inside him, the leftover fingerprint of Caspian's darkness, simply thawed in her presence. He left the room an hour later, standing straighter, his eyes clear, offering her a bow so deep it was almost a kneel. Word of such miracles spread. The title White Wolf began to be spoken, not just with awe, but with a tender reverence. Lysander, meanwhile, governed with a newfound flexibility. The grim, unyielding mask of the Ice King was still there when needed, but it was no longer permanent. He laughed more readily, a rusty but genuine sound. He was often seen walking the battlements with Elara at his side, or playing with Leo in the royal nursery, the baby's giggles echoing down the stone halls. The curse was broken, not by a spell, but by balance. The drain was gone. He could love without fear. One evening, a month after the coronation, they received a request for an audience. It was from Lady Seraphina. She entered the smaller, private receiving room looking like a ghost of her former self. Her finery was gone, replaced by a plain gray dress. Her head was bowed. "Your Majesties," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She did not look up. "You requested to speak," Lysander said, his tone neutral. "I requested to depart," Seraphina said, wringing her hands. "With your permission, my family's estate in the south. I wish to retire there, permanently, to live quietly, to cause no more trouble." "Why?" Elara asked, not unkindly. Seraphina finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "I saw it," she choked out. "In that cavern, I saw what true darkness is. I saw what pettiness like mine can be used for. And then I felt what you did during the coronation, the light, the cleansing." A tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. "I don't deserve to be near that. My every ambition feels filthy in comparison. I just want to go somewhere I can't do any more harm." Elara and Lysander exchanged a look. Exile was the expected punishment, but Elara saw not a schemer, but a broken woman who had been used as a tool and had finally seen the cost. "Your request is granted," Lysander said after a moment. "You will leave under guard, who will escort you to your estate. You will remain there, under house arrest, for no less than 5 years. After that, if your conduct is blameless, you may have limited freedom within the Southern Territory. You will never hold a position of influence again." It was mercy, but a stern one. Seraphina nodded, fresh tears of what might have been relief falling. "Thank you. Thank you, Your Majesty." She turned to go, then paused, looking at Elara. "He was wrong, you know, Caspian. He said light was weak, that it couldn't understand the dark." He gave a shaky, almost smile. "I think it understands it best of all. It just refuses to become it." After she left, Elara let out a long breath. A sad end. A necessary one,
Lysander said, but not without hope. Perhaps in solitude she can find a better version of herself. He put an arm around Elara's shoulders. You have a way of inspiring that in people. As winter began its slow, reluctant retreat, and the first stubborn buds appeared on sheltered trees, the kingdom found its rhythm. The coronation was not an end, but a true beginning. They were no longer just surviving, they were growing. One night, Elara stood on the parapet, not looking north at threats, but south at the emerging stars. Lysander joined her, handing her a warm cup of tea. Elder Theo is writing a new history, he said, amusement in his voice. He says the old one was too focused on battles and bloodlines. The new one will start with an omega in a snowstorm and a crying child. Elara laughed softly. I suppose it's as good a place to start as any. She sipped her tea, the warmth spreading through her. Do you think it's truly over? The fighting, the fear? Lysander was quiet for a moment, his gaze sweeping the darkening landscape. There will always be challenges. There will be border disputes, bad harvests, petty rivalries. The world scar is patched, not gone. But the fear that defined us for so long, that is over. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the first stars. We have given them something stronger to believe in, and we have given each other the same. Below them, in the citadel, lamps were being lit in windows, one by one, like stars being mirrored on the earth. Each light was a home, a family, a life now living under the promise of that new dawn. The long, bitter winter of the kingdom's soul had passed. The spring of the white wolf had begun. Chapter 13. Roots in the Tall. Spring in the north was not a gentle awakening, but a fierce, muddy victory. Ice groaned as it split on the rivers, and the snow retreated to reveal earth eager to life. With the thaw came a flood of activity to the onyx citadel that had nothing to do with war. Delegations arrived, but now they brought seeds instead of swords, ledgers instead of battle plans. Farmers from the fertile southern valleys sought advice on rotating crops to lands newly secured from shadow taint. Artisans from the eastern forests brought samples of timber and resin, proposing new trade routes now that the mountain passes were safe from Caspian's creatures. The citadel's great hall, once a place of cold judgment, now often smelled of soil, wood shavings, and baked bread from the shared meals. Elara thrived in this new kind of chaos. Her days were a patchwork of duties, mornings in the healing sanctuary, afternoons in council mediating disputes over water rights or grazing land, evenings often spent with Lysander and Leo in their private quarters, a haven of simple normalcy. Her power was in constant, gentle use, a nudge of clarity here, a pulse of reassurance there. She was becoming the heart of the kingdom in a literal sense, her well-being subtly tied to the land's own. It was during a council about rebuilding a village on the old Shadowfang territory that her past came calling. A messenger, breathless and coated in road dust, was admitted. He bore the seal of the new Alpha of Shadowfang, a younger, quieter cousin of Kale, who had taken leadership after the pack's elders, shamed by their treatment of Elara and cowed by the king's displeasure, had deposed their cruel leader. Your Majesty, he bowed to Lysander, then turned and bowed even deeper to Elara. My queen, Alpha Bren sends word and a request. Speak, Lysander said. The spring melt has revealed something in the woods near the old Vance homestead, near there where Elara grew up, the man said, hesitant. Our people are afraid to touch it. It feels old. It feels like her. He glanced at Elara. The Vance homestead, the place where her parents had lived before they were killed, a memory she hadn't thought of in years, a memory wrapped in pain and loss.
"What kind of structure?" Elara asked, her voice calm despite the sudden hammering of her heart. "A shrine, perhaps, or a tomb. There are markings, moon markings, white wolf markings." Elara felt the lunar circlet she wore often now grow warm against her brow. A pull, faint but insistent, tugged at her from the southeast, towards home. "We will go," Lysander said, before she could even form the thought. They traveled light and fast, a small contingent of sentinels, Elder Theo, who insisted he wouldn't miss this, and Elara with Leo in a sling. The journey to the Shadowfang lands was strange for Elara.
The woods were familiar, but the fear that had once saturated every tree for her was gone. The pack that watched them pass from a distance did so with wary respect, not contempt. The Vance land was on the edge of the territory, where the forest met the foothills. The house was a burnt-out shell, a memory of tragedy. But behind it, where the land rose sharply, the spring runoff had carved away a hillside, exposing weather-worn stones fitted together with ancient skill. It was indeed a shrine, a small, domed structure of pale granite, overgrown with roots now pulled aside. On the lintel was a carving, worn but unmistakable, a white wolf with 3 tails, howling at a crescent moon, the exact symbol that had appeared above her during the trial of silver. Elder Theo gasped, running his hands over the carving. A moon well! I thought they were all lost. Places where the white wolves would commune directly with the goddess, where the veil between earth and sky was thin. The air around the shrine hummed with a clean, potent magic, similar to Elara's own, but older, layered with the prayers of generations. "There is an entrance," Commander Ryland said, pointing to a low, dark opening partially blocked by rubble. Lysander looked at Elara. "This is your legacy, your choice." She took a deep breath, the circlet pulsing warmly. She could feel no malice, only a deep, waiting silence. "We go in." Ryland and his men cleared the entrance. Inside it was dark and dry. The air was still, scented with old stone and something sweet, like dried herbs. Light crystals brought by the sentinels illuminated a circular chamber. In the center was a pedestal, and on it rested not treasure, but a single, large, leather-bound book. Next to it lay a simple pendant on a silver chain, a howling white wolf carved from milky moonstone. Elara approached, Leo asleep against her, undisturbed by the solemn atmosphere. She opened the book. The pages were vellum, the ink faded but legible. It was a journal. The handwriting was elegant, familiar somehow. The first entry made her blood stop. "To my daughter, Elara, if the moon wills you to find this, I pray you never have to, for it will mean the darkness has come and we have failed. But if you are here, then you have awakened, and you must know the truth." It was her mother's writing. Tears blurred Elara's vision as she read, Lysander a solid presence at her shoulder. The journal told the story her parents died to keep secret. They were not simple pack members. Her mother, Althea, was the last known heir of the White Wolf line, her power hidden. Her father, Ronan, was a loyal warrior of the Shadowfangs who had sworn to protect her. When Caspian, even decades ago, had begun his search for ways to break the world scar, his agents had hunted for White Wolf descendants. To protect Elara, to mask her potent infantile aura, her parents had performed a powerful, dangerous binding ritual on her first winter solstice. It locked her wolf away, muted her scent, made her appear wolfless. It was the ultimate disguise. Then they had staged their deaths, an attack by rogues, and gone into hiding, intending to draw the hunt away from their daughter. But the attack had been too real. They had been truly discovered. The journal's last entries were frantic, instructions on how to find a trusted contact who never came, a plea for forgiveness for leaving her alone. They had died not as victims of a random pack war, but as martyrs protecting the key to the kingdom's survival. "They knew," Elara whispered, her voice thick. They knew what I was. They hid me in plain sight, in the one place no one would look for a royal heir, in the dirt, as a servant. The years of loneliness, of wondering why she was abandoned, cracked open, not with new pain, but with a flood of understanding, and a sorrow so profound it was almost sweet. They had loved her enough to let her think them dead, to let her be despised, if it meant she would live. She picked up the pendant. The moment her fingers touched the moonstone wolf, a final, gentle pulse of energy passed from it into her. A blessing, a farewell, a passing of the mantle, from mother to daughter, across the chasm of years and death. "They gave you more than a legacy," Lysander said softly, his hand on her back. "They gave you the chance to become who you needed to be. The strength you found in the cold wasn't an accident, it was their final gift." They sealed the shrine again, leaving it as a sacred site, a place of pilgrimage. Elara took the journal and the pendant. The truth of her parents' sacrifice settled into her, not as a burden, but as a foundation. She had not been unloved. She had been protected with the fiercest love imaginable. On the return journey, they passed through the Shadowfang pack village. News of the shrine's discovery had spread. As Elara walked through, people emerged from their homes, not just to stare, but to kneel. Old women who had once turned their backs, young warriors who had sneered, they all knelt in the muddy street, heads bowed towards the girl they had tormented, now understanding she was the living memory of the very heroes who had died to save them all from a horror they never knew existed. Elara did not gloat, she did not scorn. She stopped, and with Leo in her arms, she simply said, "The past is frozen, the spring is here, let us build from this mud together." It was the true end of Elara Vance, the Omega, and the full beginning of Elara, the Queen. Chapter 14. The Prophet's Purpose. As Leo grew from a baby to a sturdy, bright-eyed toddler, his unique nature became more apparent. His eyes remained that startling violet, and they saw things others did not. He would point at empty corners and laugh as if watching butterflies, or his gaze would grow distant and solemn, his small hand reaching out to touch a wall or a tree, as if soothing it. The sentinels on duty swore the torches burned brighter when he passed, and plants in the solarium seemed to lean towards him. He was a happy child, doted upon by the entire citadel, but Elara and Lysander watched him with a quiet, vigilant love. They were the prophet child, and his power, while benign, was a beacon they knew other lesser darknesses might one day be drawn to. Elder Theo, who had appointed himself the child's unofficial tutor in all things mystical, spent hours with him. He does not command power, he converses with it, he persuades the energy in things to be its best self. It is a power of profound harmony, not force. Caspian wanted to weaponize that harmony, Lysander mused, a shadow of the old tension in his shoulders.
Exactly, Theo nodded. To take a song and turn it into a scream. But the song itself is why the seal responded to him. The world scar is a dissonance, a wrong note in the world's song. Leo's innate power is the perfect countermelody, not to destroy the dissonance, but to absorb it, transform it over time. This gave Elara an idea, a daring, long-term idea. The next full moon, she and Lysander took Leo to the Hall of Ancestors, to the statue of the first king. The ley lines were strong here, the connection to the keystone palpable. "The seal is stable," Elara said, holding Leo's hand. "But it is a patch," Theo says. "It needs a permanent healer, not a warrior to guard it, but a musician to slowly retune it." Lysander understood immediately. "You want to link him to it, not as a battery, but as a therapist?" "As a guide," Elara said, "a gentle, constant presence of harmony near the dissonance. His power could, over decades, centuries perhaps, soothe the world scar from a raging wound into a quiet scar, and maybe one day into healed skin." It was a monumental decision. It would tie Leo's destiny irrevocably to the land, a burden for any soul, but it was also a purpose, a beautiful, peaceful purpose for a power that had only ever been sought as a weapon. They didn't force it. Over the following months, during their visits to the hall, Elara would gently encourage Leo to listen to the stone, to the deep, slow song of the earth below. The toddler, who treated everything as a game, would press his small palms to the floor, his violet eyes going wide and soft. He would hum a tuneless, sweet sound, and the air would grow still and peaceful. Then, on the anniversary of the coronation, they decided to try. It was not a grand ritual, but a quiet, family moment, just the three of them in the moonlit hall. Elara and Lysander sat on either side of Leo, their hands on his small back. They opened the bond between them fully, creating a circle of shared energy, king's strength, queen's light, and the child's pure harmony. "Listen to the deep song, my heart," Elara whispered to her son. "The one that is sad. Can you sing it a happier tune?" Leo, serious now, placed his hands on the base of the first king's statue. He closed his eyes. Elara and Lysander poured their combined balanced power into him, not to amplify, but to support, to protect his gentle spirit. What happened next was not a flash of light, but a deep, resonant change in the atmosphere. A chord struck in a frequency below hearing. The very stones of the citadel seemed to exhale a sigh of contentment that went on for minutes. Far to the north, in the dead valley, the ancient, frayed edges of the magical net over the world scar didn't just strengthen, they softened. The dissonance remained, but now, wrapped around it like a blanket, was a gentle, persistent lullaby of harmony. Leo opened his eyes, yawned, and slumped sleepily against Elara. "All better," he mumbled, before falling into a deep, natural sleep. The connection was made. It was subtle, benign, and living. Leo would grow up with a dual awareness of the world around him and of the deep, slow, healing song he was now a part of. It was not a burden, but a calling he had been born to fulfill, now activated with love and guidance, not greed. That night, Elara had a dream. She stood in a field of summer flowers under a full moon. Before her stood a woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, and a strong man with a gentle smile. Her parents. They did not speak, but their pride and love washed over her like warm sunlight. Then the scene shifted, and she saw Leo as a young man standing on a green, thriving hill where the dead valley had been, his hand on a healthy, vibrant tree, a smile of perfect peace on his face. She woke with tears on her cheeks, but her heart was full. The circle was complete. The sacrifices of the past had protected the potential of the present, and that potential was now gently securing the future. The kingdom had its guardians, a king of strength, a queen of light, and a prince of harmony. The triad was whole. Chapter 15. Howling at a New Moon. 5 years passed not as a slow march, but as a swift, deep river of change. The Onyx Citadel was still a fortress, but now its gates stood open wider. The village that had sprouted at its feet had grown into a thriving town, aptly named New Dawn. It was a bustling hub where wolves from every territory mixed. Southern farmers traded grain for northern furs. Eastern woodworkers sold their wares next to western metalsmiths. The central square featured not a weapon, but a beautiful fountain carved from pale stone, depicting a white wolf and a black wolf curled protectively around a playing child. Elara's healing sanctuary had blossomed into a proper academy. Young wolves, identified by a sensitivity to magic or a healer's touch, came from every pack to learn herb lore, medicine, and the delicate art of energy harmonization Elara had pioneered. They were called moon-touched, and they were becoming a new, respected class within the society, traveling to troubled areas to cleanse blighted land or soothe communal strife. The White Wolf's legacy was no longer a solitary myth, it was a living, growing tradition. Lysander's rule had evolved into a model of shrewd, forward-thinking governance. He enforced laws with firm justice, but his councils were famed for their fairness.
The alphas, once rivals, now functioned as a true parliament, their debates vigorous but rooted in shared purpose. The shadow of the Ice King had receded, replaced by the image of the steadfast king, a ruler who had learned that true strength lay in the stability he fostered, not just the battles he won. And in the middle of it all was their family.
Leo, at 6, was a whirlwind of curiosity and quiet power. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's gentle smile, but those violet eyes held an ancient knowing. He split his time between lessons with Elder Theo on history and magic, rough-and-tumble training with a patiently amused Commander Rylan, who taught him to throw a knife and track a deer, and long, quiet afternoons in the Hall of Ancestors, where he would sit and talk to the deep stone, as he called it. The connection they had forged was a living thing. The kingdom's health was now part of his own well-being, and in turn, his joyful spirit seemed to encourage the land's fertility. One crisp autumn evening, with the smell of wood smoke and ripe apples in the air, the royal family stood on the now familiar parapet. Leo was between them, pointing out constellations as Elder Theo had taught him. "That's the guardian wolf," he said, pointing to a bright cluster, "and there's the Luna's bow. Theo says when the bow points at the guardian, it's a time for new beginnings." "It seems it's always a time for new beginnings with you here," Lysander said, ruffling his son's hair. Elara smiled, leaning into Lysander's side. The bond between them was as constant and comfortable as her own heartbeat, a deep, quiet river of mutual understanding and unwavering support. They had faced the end of the world and built a new one from its ashes. The love between them was not a fiery, dramatic passion, but something stronger, a choice reaffirmed every day, a partnership forged in trust and tempered by shared sacrifice. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked him quietly as Leo chattered about wanting a puppy. "The simplicity of just being the feared king, the silence?" Lysander looked down at her, his gold eyes warm in the twilight. His gaze swept over the lighted windows of new dawn below, the sounds of laughter and music drifting up. This noise, this chaos, this life, this is the song I never knew I was waiting to hear. A messenger approached, bowing. "Your Majesties, the ambassadors from the Ocean Singer Pacts of the Far West have arrived. They wish to discuss the proposed trade pact." Lysander nodded. "We will receive them in the morning." He looked at Elara. "It seems our song is about to get a new verse." As they turned to go inside, Leo tugged on Elara's sleeve. "Mama, will I ever have a wolf like you and Papa?" Elara knelt, meeting his luminous eyes. "You have a different kind of wolf, my heart. Yours isn't inside you, it's all around you. It's the wolf of the whispering trees and the singing stones and the growing grass. It's the whole world, and that is the most powerful wolf of all." Satisfied, Leo nodded and scampered ahead, his questions already turning to what was for dinner. Elara stood, taking Lysander's offered arm. They walked back into the warm, lighted citadel, leaving the cold, starry night behind. The story that began with a crying child in a snowbank had woven itself into the very tapestry of the kingdom. The Omega had found her strength, the king had found his heart, the child had found his purpose, and somewhere in the deep, silent places of the earth, a wound that had festered for ages, slowly, gently, under the influence of a lullaby only a prophet could hear, began at long last to truly heal. The winter would come again, as it always did, but now the people knew that after the longest, coldest night, there would always be a dawn, and in that dawn, two wolves, one of shadow, one of light, would always be standing guard with a child of harmony between them, howling not in challenge, but in celebration of the peace they had won and the future they were building together.